Hello, and welcome to Infidelity Tales Lab. Your support means everything to us. We'd love to know, which geographical location are you joining from today? At home? On the go? Share with us below. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Architect's Mask. Conrad Whitlock tucked away his cell phone after confirming the final details of what would become the largest acquisition in his firm's history. A $50 million deal that would transform three struggling tech startups into a unified powerhouse under his silent guidance. None of his neighbors in the modest suburban community of Lakeside Heights would ever suspect that the quiet man who drove a 10-year-old sedan was the mastermind behind Phantom Investments, a private equity firm that operated with surgical precision and absolute discretion. As he pulled into his driveway, Conrad mentally shifted back into the role he'd been playing for years, the struggling financial advisor barely keeping his family afloat. He loosened his tie, deliberately mussed his hair, and added a slight slouch to his shoulders before entering his home. "You're late again," Stella Whitlock called from the kitchen, not bothering to look up from her wine glass. "Dinner's cold. Had to finish up some paperwork," Conrad replied, his voice deliberately weary. "Any chance for a microwave revival?" Stella scoffed, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her glass. "Do I look like a waitress? There's a plate in the fridge. Your son locked himself in his room after another disastrous day at school." Conrad nodded silently, making his way to their son's bedroom. He knocked gently. "Leo? It's Dad. Can I come in?" After a moment, the door cracked open. Leo Whitlock, 14 and lanky with his father's observant eyes, stepped aside to let him in. The boy's room was a controlled chaos of sketch pads, books on architecture, and half-finished models of buildings. "Mom's on the warpath again," Leo muttered, returning to his desk where he'd been sketching what looked like an elaborate bridge design. Conrad sat on the edge of the bed. "Rough day at school?" "Mr. Patterson handed back our physics tests. I got a C-." Leo shrugged, trying to appear indifferent despite the tension in his shoulders. "Mom found it in my backpack." "A C- isn't the end of the world," Conrad said gently. "Tell that to Mom. She went ballistic, said I'm wasting my potential, just like—" Leo trailed off, unwilling to finish the sentence. "Just like your old man?" Conrad finished with a sad smile. "It's okay, I know what she thinks of me." What Stella didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that Conrad had deliberately cultivated his image as a mediocre provider. The truth was far more complex. 10 years ago, he discovered his extraordinary talent for identifying struggling businesses with untapped potential. Rather than joining a high-profile firm, he'd created Phantom Investments under a labyrinth of shell companies and proxies, allowing him to operate in complete anonymity. Conrad had his reasons for the deception. His father had been a celebrated financial wizard whose success had made him a target. When Conrad was 12, his father was kidnapped and held for ransom by people who'd researched his wealth extensively. Though the police rescued him, the experience had left deep psychological scars in Conrad. He'd promised himself his own family would never face such dangers. But years of playing the underachiever had taken its toll on his marriage. Stella, once genuinely in love with him, had grown resentful of what she perceived as his lack of ambition. She'd married Conrad expecting the brilliant economics graduate to become a financial titan, not the supposed struggling financial advisor whose modest income barely covered their mortgage. "I notice you're working on that bridge design for the city competition," Conrad said, changing the subject. Leo's face brightened slightly. "Yeah, I probably shouldn't waste time on it since I'm already screwing up my real subjects, but—" "Your passion isn't a waste of time," Conrad interrupted firmly. "Never let anyone tell you otherwise." After spending an hour helping Leo refine his bridge design, Conrad headed to the master bedroom. Stella was already asleep, or pretending to be. Their relationship had devolved into a cold war of silence and occasional skirmishes. He quietly gathered his pillow and a blanket, heading for the guest room that had become his de facto bedroom over the past year. As he lay in the dark, Conrad scrolled through encrypted messages about tomorrow's closing procedures for the massive deal. None of his clients had ever met him in person. He conducted all business through secure channels and trusted proxies. Only his attorney, Miranda Powell, knew his true identity, a necessity protected by attorney-client privilege. The irony wasn't lost on Conrad. To the world that mattered in high finance, he was a mysterious legend whose investment touch turned struggling companies into gold. To his wife, he was a disappointment. To his son, he was a well-meaning but ineffectual father. Something would have to change soon. The mask was becoming unbearable. Chapter 2. The Catalyst. The morning unfolded with its usual routine. Conrad prepared breakfast, while Stella readied herself for her job as an event coordinator for Lakeside Heights' wealthiest residents. Her career gave her access to the social circle she craved, but couldn't fully access due to what she perceived as Conrad's failures. "I'll be home late," Stella announced, barely touching her breakfast. "I'm coordinating the Hendersons' anniversary gala. Try not to wait up." Conrad nodded, noticing how she didn't meet his eyes, a tell he'd cataloged years ago that usually indicated she was lying. The Hendersons' anniversary wasn't for another 3 weeks. He knew because his firm had quietly financed Mr. Henderson's luxury watch company expansion. After Stella left, Conrad drove Leo to school before heading to the small office he maintained downtown, a necessary prop in his elaborate charade. His assistant, Naomi, one of the few people aware of his dual identity, greeted him with a knowing smile. "The papers are ready for the Triton merger," she said, handing him a thick folder. "And Miranda called. She says everything's in place for the final transfer." Conrad nodded, feeling a curious mixture of triumph and emptiness. The $50 million deal would solidify his position as one of the most successful private investors in the country, yet he couldn't share this victory with his family. "I think it's time we discussed phase 2, he said quietly. Naomi's eyebrows rose. "You're sure?" "Once you start." "I'm sure," Conrad interrupted. "Set up a secure meeting with Miranda for tomorrow morning. It's time to make some changes." Throughout the day, Conrad finalized the details of the deal, his mind partly focused on the elaborate plan he'd been constructing for months. He'd originally intended to reveal his success gradually, easing his family into the reality of his actual wealth. But something told him that scenario was no longer viable. When his private phone buzzed with a message from Leo at 3:15 p.m., Conrad felt a jolt of concern. Leo never texted during school hours. "Failed my math test. Mom's gonna freak. Can you come home early?" Conrad immediately cleared his schedule and drove home, arriving just as Leo walked up the driveway, shoulders slumped under the weight of his backpack and impending confrontation. "That bad?" Conrad asked gently. Leo handed him the test paper without a word. The red F at the top was accompanied by a note from the teacher. Leo seems distracted. "Conference needed." "I studied," Leo said defensively. "I just blanked when the test started." "I believe you," Conrad replied, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Everyone has bad days. We'll figure this out." They entered the house to find Stella already home, her expression thunderous. Conrad realized she must have returned early, perhaps hoping to surprise Leo after school. "Show me," she demanded, holding out her hand. Leo reluctantly handed over the test. Stella's face flushed with anger as she scanned the paper. An F? After all the tutors and study sessions. Her voice rose with each word. "This is completely unacceptable, Leo. What were you thinking?" "I tried," Leo began. "Clearly not hard enough." Stella interrupted. "This is what happens when you waste all your time on those ridiculous building designs, instead of focusing on what actually matters." Conrad stepped forward. "Stella, let's discuss this calmly. One test doesn't." "Oh, don't start with your mediocre expectations," Stella snapped, turning her fury toward Conrad. "This is partly your fault. He's learning to settle for failure by watching you." Conrad felt the familiar sting of her words, but maintained his composure. "That's enough, Stella. Leo needs support, not." "Support? Where's your support been for this family? You're a walking example of wasted potential." Stella's voice echoed through the house. "Leo, do you want to end up like your father? A man who can barely keep the lights on? A man whose colleagues from college are now running investment firms while he struggles with basic financial planning for retirees?" "Mom, stop it," Leo pleaded, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. No, you need to hear this, Stella continued, her voice dripping with contempt. Your father had every opportunity to be successful, and he threw it all away with his pathetic risk aversion and lack of ambition. And now you're following right in his footsteps. You're becoming useless, just like your father. The word hung in the air between them. Useless. Conrad stood perfectly still, his expression unreadable. In that moment, something crystallized within him, a decision that had been years in the making. The knowledge that he'd just closed a $50 million deal that morning sat heavy in his mind, a stark contrast to Stella's assessment of him. Leo, go to your room, Conrad said quietly. Your mother and I need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Stella said dismissively. I have to get ready. I'm meeting clients for dinner. She turned and headed upstairs, leaving Conrad and Leo standing in uncomfortable silence. She didn't mean it, Dad, Leo said awkwardly. Conrad looked at his son, seeing the mixture of embarrassment and pity in the boy's eyes. That pity was the final straw. Yes, she did, Conrad replied calmly. But she's wrong about both of us. Remember that, Leo. Later that evening, after Leo had retreated to his room and Stella had left for her client dinner, Conrad made a series of phone calls from his home office. First to Miranda, then to Naomi, and finally to his private banker. Each call was brief, precise, and set irrevocable events in motion. As he ended the final call, Conrad felt a strange sense of peace. The mask he'd worn for so long was about to come off, and the consequences would be seismic. Chapter 3. The Revelation. Conrad waited until midnight before driving to the upscale restaurant on the other side of town, the one Stella had mentioned in passing to her friend on the phone, not knowing Conrad had overheard. He parked across the street, his expensive binoculars, a tool from his due diligence investigations of potential investments, trained on the restaurant patio. Through the lenses, he watched as Stella laughed intimately with Bradford Dixon, the flashy owner of several local car dealerships. Conrad recognized him immediately. Dixon had approached Conrad's firm for financing 6 months ago, unaware that he was actually meeting with one of Conrad's proxies. Conrad had declined the investment opportunity after his background check revealed Dixon's history of questionable business practices. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Conrad. While Stella believed she was having an affair with a successful businessman, Conrad knew that Dixon's dealerships were barely staying afloat, propped up by creative accounting and mounting debt. As he watched Dixon reach across the table to stroke Stella's hand, Conrad felt no jealousy, only a profound sense of clarity. Their marriage had been dead for years. He had simply been going through the motions for Leo's sake. Conrad returned home and spent the rest of the night putting his plan into motion. He accessed his secure server and transferred documents to Miranda, authorized specific banking transactions, and drafted several letters. By dawn, he had completed preparations for what would be the most decisive day of his life. After catching a few hours of sleep, Conrad drove Leo to school, as usual. Dad, Leo said hesitantly as they approached the school. About what Mom said yesterday. Don't worry about it, Conrad replied. Sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're angry. But she said stuff like that before, Leo persisted. And I've seen how you just take it. Conrad turned to face his son, choosing his words carefully. Leo, there's something important I want you to understand. Sometimes people aren't what they appear to be. Sometimes we keep parts of ourselves hidden for various reasons. Like what? Leo asked, his curiosity piqued. Let's just say things are going to change soon, Conrad answered. And I want you to remember that whatever happens between your mother and me, you're the most important person in my life. Leo studied his father's face, sensing something significant in his words. Okay, Dad. One more thing, Conrad added as Leo opened the car door. Pack a bag when you get home today. Essentials for a couple of weeks. Clothes, your medication, and maybe your sketchbook. Tell your mother you're staying at Damien's house for a school project. Are we going somewhere? Leo asked, confused. Trust me, Conrad said simply. It's time for a change. After dropping off Leo, Conrad drove to Miranda's office. The elegant attorney greeted him with a knowing smile. Everything's prepared as you requested, she said, gesturing to the stack of documents on her desk. Though I must say, Conrad, the timing seems rather sudden. It's been a decade in the making, Conrad replied, signing where indicated. I just needed the right catalyst. And Mrs. Whitlock provided that yesterday, I presume? Miranda asked, her tone professional but her eyes sympathetic. Conrad nodded. She called me useless, said I could barely keep the lights on. Miranda's eyebrow arched as she glanced at the banking statement showing Conrad's personal net worth, just over $340 million. Well, she said dryly, perception and reality rarely align perfectly. By noon, Conrad had executed every element of his plan's first phase. The house mortgage had been paid in full, with ownership transferred solely to his name. 2 new vehicles, a Tesla Model S Plaid for himself and a Land Rover Defender for Leo, had been purchased with cash and would be delivered that afternoon. First-class tickets for a world tour had been booked for him and Leo, with their first destination being Tokyo. Most significantly, Conrad had confirmed with his banker that $5 million had been transferred to a new trust fund in Leo's name, structured to provide for his education and future while protecting him from financial manipulation. Before heading home, Conrad made one final stop at a high-end electronics store, purchasing 2 new smartphones with international capabilities. Everything about their old life would be left behind, including their digital footprints. When Conrad arrived home, he found the house empty as expected. Stella had texted that she'd be working late again. Conrad methodically packed his essential belongings, emptied his home safe of important documents, and transferred his collection of rare coins, a private passion he'd never shared with Stella, to a secure case. As he worked, Conrad reflected on how thoroughly he'd compartmentalized his life. The facade of struggling financial advisor Conrad Whitlock had been maintained so completely that not even his wife had suspected the truth. His real work, the intricate deals and strategic investments that had built his fortune, had been conducted through his network of proxies and secure communications. When Leo returned from school, Conrad helped him pack, explaining only that they would be taking a trip together. To his credit, Leo asked few questions, seeming to understand instinctively that something momentous was occurring. Dad, is this about what Mom said? Leo finally asked as they loaded their bags into Conrad's old sedan. Partly, Conrad admitted, but it's more about what happens next. With their belongings secured, Conrad took a final walk through the house. In the kitchen, he placed an envelope on the counter, positioned where Stella would immediately see it. Inside was a copy of the paid mortgage statement, the deed transfer, and a brief note in Conrad's precise handwriting. Stella, I paid off the house. It's now solely in my name, though you may continue to live here if you wish. You'll find 2 new cars in the garage. Consider them my parting gifts, though only one is for you. Leo and I will be traveling for a while. Don't bother trying to reach us on our old numbers. By the way, the lights are still on. I guess I'm not as useless as you thought. Guess who's useless now? Conrad. As a final touch, Conrad left his wedding ring on top of the note. Father and son drove away just as the afternoon sun began its descent, leaving behind a life built on carefully constructed illusions. In the passenger seat, Leo seemed both anxious and exhilarated, occasionally glancing at his father with new eyes. Where are we really going, Dad? He finally asked as they headed toward the interstate. Conrad smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes for the first time in years. To see the world, Leo, and to start telling the truth. Chapter 4. Shattered Glass. Stella Whitlock arrived home at 11:30 p.m., slightly tipsy from expensive wine and the intoxicating attention Bradford Dixon had lavished on her throughout the evening. She called out for Leo as she entered, then remembered he was supposedly staying at a friend's house for a school project. The house felt unusually quiet, lacking even the subtle sounds of Conrad working in his home office. She kicked off her heels in the foyer and padded into the kitchen for a glass of water. That's when she saw the envelope, her name written in Conrad's neat handwriting, his wedding ring gleaming coldly on top. Something inside her knew, even before opening it, that everything was about to change. Her hands trembled slightly as she read Conrad's note, confusion giving way to disbelief and then to searing anger. She rushed to the garage to confirm his claim and found a new Tesla and Land Rover where Conrad's sedan and her Audi should have been. The vehicle sparkled under the garage lights, price tags still visible on their windshields. Stella stormed back into the house, grabbing her phone to call Conrad, only to hear his message. The number you have reached is no longer in service. She tried Leo's phone next with the same result. What the hell is happening? She shouted into the empty house, her voice echoing off the walls that, according to the documents in her hand, now belonged solely to her supposedly useless husband. Rushing to their bedroom, she flung open Conrad's closet door to find it half empty, his favorite suits and casual clothes missing. His dresser drawers were similarly depleted. In the bathroom, his toiletries were gone. It was as if he'd systematically removed himself from their life. Stella sank onto the bed, her mind racing to make sense of the situation. Conrad had paid off their mortgage, a financial impossibility for the man she thought she knew. He'd purchased 2 luxury vehicles with cash. None of it aligned with the struggling financial advisor who'd been cutting coupons and driving a car with 150,000 miles on it. She called Bradford, who answered groggily. "What's wrong, babe?" "Conrad's gone," Stella said, her voice tight with confusion. "He took Leo and left." "Good riddance," Bradford mumbled. "Now we don't have to sneak around anymore." "You don't understand," Stella snapped. "He paid off the house. He bought 2 cars worth over $200,000. With cash." There was a long silence before Bradford spoke again, his voice now fully alert. "That's impossible. Conrad's broke. Everyone knows that." "Apparently everyone was wrong," Stella replied bitterly. After hanging up, Stella began searching the house for clues. Conrad's home office revealed little. He'd taken his laptop and cleared out his filing cabinet. The safe behind the abstract painting was open and empty. By morning, Stella's confusion had hardened into fury. She began calling everyone they knew, demanding information about Conrad's whereabouts. No one had answers. His office downtown reported that he hadn't come in and wasn't answering calls. In Tokyo, Conrad and Leo checked into the presidential suite of the Park Hyatt. Leo stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing in awe at the sprawling cityscape below. "Dad, how can we afford this?" he asked, gesturing around the luxurious suite. Conrad took a deep breath. "That's something we need to discuss. Sit down, Leo." For the next hour, Conrad explained the truth about his career and finances. He showed Leo secure photos of the companies he controlled, the investments he'd made, and finally, his personal banking statements. Leo stared at the screen, his eyes widening at the 9 sum displayed. $340 million, he whispered. "All this time you let Mom think." "I created a fiction," Conrad admitted. "Initially for security reasons, but eventually it became easier to maintain the lie than to explain why I'd hidden the truth for so long." "Does this have something to do with what happened to Grandpa?" Leo asked perceptively. Conrad nodded, impressed by his son's intuition. "Partly. When I was about your age, my father was kidnapped by people who targeted him for his wealth. After that, I became paranoid about displaying success. But why didn't you at least tell Mom and me?" "Your mother." Conrad paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your mother and I married young. I already had some success, but was still maintaining a low profile. As time went on, she became increasingly resentful of what she perceived as my lack of ambition. By the time my wealth had grown significantly, our relationship had deteriorated to the point where I didn't trust her with the truth. And now? Why tell me now?" Conrad's expression softened. "Because you deserve to know who your father really is. Not the failure your mother described, but not exactly a hero either. Just a man who made complicated choices." Leo was silent for a long moment, processing everything. "So what happens next?" "We travel. We learn about each other without the lies between us. And when we return, everything will be different." Conrad reached into his pocket and pulled out a new smartphone. "This is yours now. New number, secure communications. I've already loaded it with the contact information for Naomi and Miranda, my assistant and attorney. They can reach us anytime." "What about Mom?" Conrad's expression hardened slightly. "Your mother made her choices long before yesterday. The words she said to us, were merely the final straw. As Leo explored their suite, Conrad checked his secure email. Naomi had confirmed that Stella had been calling the office repeatedly, growing increasingly agitated with each call. Miranda reported that Bradford Dixon had attempted to access information about Conrad's finances through a private investigator, an expected move that would lead nowhere. Conrad smiled grimly. Phase 1 was complete. Stella's world was already beginning to crack. Phase 2 would shatter it entirely. Back in Lakeside Heights, Stella's day had gone from bad to catastrophic. She'd driven to Conrad's office, demanding answers from his receptionist, only to be told that Conrad had taken an indefinite leave of absence. When she'd threatened to call the police to report Leo missing, the receptionist had calmly produced a notarized letter from Conrad, granting him sole temporary custody during their trip, signed by Stella herself. "I never signed this," Stella had shouted, staring at what appeared to be her perfect signature. The receptionist, Naomi, Conrad had called her, had simply smiled. "We have video of you signing it last month, Mrs. Whitlock. Perhaps you forgot." Stella knew she was being lied to, but the signature was unervingly perfect. She'd fled the office, her thoughts in chaos. By evening, Stella had called Conrad's number 50 times, each attempt met with the same disconnection message. She'd sent 30 text messages, ranging from furious demands to tearful pleas. "Where the hell are you? Bring Leo home now. You can't just take our son and disappear. Whatever game you're playing, it's over. Come home. Conrad, please. Let's talk about this. I'm sorry about what I said. I was upset. At least tell me Leo is safe." No responses came. When Bradford arrived that night, his reaction to the news about Conrad's apparent wealth had shifted from disbelief to calculating interest. "There has to be an explanation," he said, pacing the living room. "Maybe he embezzled the money. Maybe he's running a Ponzi scheme." "Conrad's too cautious for that," Stella replied, her voice hollow. "Too risk-averse. Everyone has secrets," Bradford insisted. "We just need to find out what his are." As Bradford began making calls to his contacts in local finance, Stella wandered into Leo's room. The space felt different, emptier in subtle ways. His favorite books were gone, as was the architectural model he'd been working on for months. On his desk, she found a single sketch, a detailed drawing of the Tokyo skyline with a note at the bottom that read, "First stop." The realization that Conrad had been planning this, that Leo had known they were leaving, sent a wave of betrayal through her. Her son had chosen his father over her. In that moment, Stella's phone chimed with an incoming email. The subject line read simply, "Conrad Whitlock closes $50 million tech merger." The email was a business newsletter she'd subscribed to years ago and usually ignored. With trembling fingers, she opened it to find a feature article about a mysterious investment strategist named Conrad Whitlock, who had orchestrated one of the year's most significant private equity deals, the merger of 3 tech startups into a new entity called Tricor Solutions. The article mentioned that Whitlock was known for his reclusiveness and brilliance, operating primarily through proxies and never appearing in public. The final paragraph noted that this latest success added to Whitlock's estimated net worth of well over $300 million. Stella stared at her phone in disbelief, the pieces finally clicking into place. The husband she'd belittled for years, the man she'd called useless to his face and derided behind his back, was actually one of the most successful private investors in the country. And now he was gone, taking their son and leaving her with nothing but a paid-off house, a luxury car, and the dawning realization that she'd monumentally misjudged the man she'd married. Her phone chimed again with another email, this one from Miranda Powell, Conrad's attorney. It contained only a link to a cloud storage folder and a password. When Stella entered the password, she found hundreds of photos, surveillance images of her and Bradford together over the past 18 months, date and timestamps included. The final image was from 2 nights ago, Bradford's hand intimately placed on her thigh under the restaurant table. The message was clear. Conrad had known everything. Stella's legs gave out, and she sank to the floor of Leo's room, her son's sketch of Tokyo still clutched in her hand, as the full magnitude of what she'd lost began to sink in. Chapter 5. The Domino Effect. One week into their world tour, Conrad and Leo stood atop the Tokyo Skytree, gazing out at the sprawling metropolis below. Leo had been flourishing away from the pressure of his mother's expectations, revealing a natural talent for architecture that Conrad was determined to nurture. "I've been thinking," Conrad said, watching his son sketch the cityscape. "When we get to our next destination, how would you feel about taking some architecture courses?" Leo looked up from his sketch pad. "Like college courses? Why not? Money isn't an issue, and you clearly have both the passion and the aptitude." Leo's expression brightened. "That would be amazing, Dad." He hesitated before adding, "I never told Mom how much I loved architecture because she always said it wasn't a real career like medicine or law." Conrad's jaw tightened briefly. "Your mother and I had different priorities." As they descended in the elevator, Conrad checked his secure phone. There was a message from Naomi with a simple update. "Domino 1 has fallen." Conrad allowed himself a small smile. Phase 2 was proceeding exactly as planned. Back in Lakeside Heights, Bradford Dixon stared in disbelief at the foreclosure notice on his desk. His primary bank had called in his loans after an anonymous tip had revealed irregularities in his dealership's financial reporting. The audit that followed had uncovered years of creative accounting and tax discrepancies. "This can't be happening," he muttered, reaching for his phone to call his attorney. Before he could dial, his assistant buzzed through. "Mr. Dixon, there's a Ms. Powell here to see you. She says she represents someone interested in purchasing your dealerships." Bradford straightened his tie, a flicker of hope igniting. "Send her in." Miranda Powell entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Without preamble, she placed a folder on Bradford's desk. "My client is prepared to purchase all 3 of your dealerships at 60% of market value, with the deal closing within 48 hours. This offer expires at noon tomorrow." Bradford scoffed. 60%? That's highway robbery. "Who's your client?" Miranda's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Someone who knows exactly how desperate your situation is, Mr. Dixon. Someone who also knows about the $430,000 you embezzled from your previous employer 7 years ago, a detail that hasn't yet reached the auditors, but certainly could." The color drained from Bradford's face. "How could anyone possibly know about that?" "My client is thorough," Miranda replied, standing to leave. "Noon tomorrow, Mr. Dixon. Take the offer or face the consequences." As Miranda left, Bradford immediately called Stella, his voice tight with panic. "Something's happening. I'm being set up." "What are you talking about?" Stella asked, distracted by her own problems. She'd spent the morning being informed by the country club that her membership had been revoked due to ethical concerns, the same country club where she'd been coordinating events for the elite of Lakeside Heights. "My dealerships are being foreclosed on, and now some lawyer shows up offering to buy them for pennies on the dollar." She knew things, Stella. Things nobody could know. Stella felt a chill run through her. What was the lawyer's name? "Powell. Miranda Powell. The same attorney who had sent Stella the damning photos of her affair. The same attorney who had produced the forged custody document with Stella's perfect signature. "It's Conrad," Stella said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's behind this." "That's impossible," Bradford scoffed. "Conrad's just a small-time financial planner. He doesn't have this kind of power." "You don't understand," Stella insisted. "Conrad isn't who he thought he was. He's worth hundreds of millions. He's been hiding it all these years." There was a long silence before Bradford spoke again, his voice now calculating. "If that's true, then we need to find a way to use it. If he's been hiding his assets during your marriage, that's fraud. You could be entitled to half." The idea took root in Stella's mind immediately. She'd already consulted a divorce attorney, who had been skeptical of her claims about Conrad's hidden wealth. But if she could prove it, "I need to get into his home office," Stella decided. "There must be something there, some evidence I missed." After hanging up, Stella methodically began searching Conrad's office again. She removed books from shelves, checked behind pictures, and examined the floor for loose boards. Finally, in frustration, she began pounding on the walls, listening for hollow spots. In the corner behind Conrad's desk, one section sounded different. Stella examined it closely and discovered a seam cleverly disguised by the wallpaper pattern. She pried at it with a letter opener until a small panel popped open, revealing a hidden safe. Her heart racing, Stella tried combinations on the digital keypad. Their anniversary failed, Leo's birthday failed, Conrad's birthday failed. In desperation, she tried her own birthday, and to her surprise, the safe clicked open. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. For Stella, when you inevitably find this. With trembling hands, she took the drive to Conrad's computer and plugged it in. The drive contained a single video file labeled Watch Me. The video began playing automatically. Conrad appeared on screen, seated in his office. Not their home office, but an elegant space she'd never seen before. "Hello, Stella," the recorded Conrad said calmly. "If you're watching this, it means you've found my emergency safe after I've initiated contingency plan alpha. Congratulations on your persistence, though I must admit I made this fairly easy to find." Conrad's image leaned forward slightly. "You're undoubtedly confused about recent events, so allow me to clarify some things. Yes, I am wealthy, significantly so. I've spent our entire marriage hiding this fact from you for reasons that once seemed important, but have become increasingly irrelevant as your contempt for me grew." He smiled thinly. "You're probably thinking about divorce now, calculating your share of my fortune. Let me save you the trouble. Every dollar I've earned has been meticulously documented and legally structured to remain my separate property under the laws of our state. The prenuptial agreement you signed, which explicitly covered undisclosed assets acquired during marriage, has been reinforced by annual legal reviews you unwittingly signed during our tax preparations." Stella remembered those documents, pages of legalese she'd signed without reading while Conrad prepared their seemingly modest tax returns. "Furthermore," Conrad continued, "I've been documenting your affair with Bradford Dixon for the past 18 months, which constitutes marital misconduct under our state's laws. This would significantly reduce any claim you might make, even if my assets were marital property, which they are not." The Conrad in the video paused, his expression hardening. "I could have revealed my success years ago, Stella. I chose not to because I wanted to be loved for myself, not my money. What I discovered instead was that you didn't love me at all. The contempt you showed, the disdain you expressed, those revealed your true character. As for what happens next," he continued, "that depends partly on you. If you choose to pursue legal action, you'll find yourself facing a team of attorneys who have been preparing for this eventuality for years. If you choose to accept the situation gracefully, you'll find that the house and car I've left you will provide a comfortable life, though perhaps not the one you envisioned when you began sleeping with a man whose dealerships are now being foreclosed upon." The video ended with Conrad looking directly into the camera. "One final note, Stella. Leo knows everything now. All the times you belittled me in front of him, all the pressure you put on him to succeed where you thought I had failed. He now understands the full context of those moments. I'll leave you to imagine how that revelation has affected his view of you." The screen went black, leaving Stella staring at her own reflection in the monitor, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. In Switzerland, Conrad and Leo enjoyed a leisurely breakfast at their hotel in Zurich. Leo had just completed his first week of specialized architecture classes at ETH Zurich, where his talent had already drawn attention from the instructors. "Your project impressed Professor Muller," Conrad remarked, scrolling through an email on his phone. "He's asking if you'd consider joining their summer program for gifted students." Leo looked up from his sketchbook, his eyes bright with excitement. "Really? That would be amazing." Conrad smiled, enjoying his son's newfound confidence. The past few weeks had transformed Leo from an insecure, anxious teenager into a young man beginning to recognize his own potential. His secure phone buzzed with a message from Miranda. Dixon signed the papers. All 3 dealerships now under our control. Domino 2 down. Conrad's smile took on a harder edge. He thought of Stella, alone in the house they had shared, surrounded by evidence of his success and her misjudgment. He thought of Bradford, signing away his business empire for a fraction of its value to avoid criminal charges. "Everything okay, Dad?" Leo asked, noticing the shift in Conrad's expression. Conrad softened his features. Everything's exactly as it should be, Leo. Exactly as it should be. Chapter 6. Collateral Damage. By the third month of their world tour, Conrad and Leo had settled into a comfortable routine. They would spend a few weeks in each location, with Leo attending specialized architecture workshops, while Conrad managed his business empire remotely. Currently in Barcelona, they had taken an apartment with a stunning view of Gaudí's unfinished masterpiece, La Sagrada Familia. Leo had flourished during their travels, his natural talent for architectural design nurtured by exposure to the world's greatest structures and mentorship from renowned architect Conrad had connected him with. More importantly, the pressure and anxiety that had plagued him in Lakeside Heights had dissipated, replaced by genuine confidence and curiosity. "Dad, Professor Garcia invited me to join his studio session tomorrow," Leo announced as they shared dinner on their terrace. They're discussing innovative approaches to sustainable urban development. Conrad nodded approvingly. "Sounds perfect for you. Your bridge design incorporated several sustainable elements." "That reminds me," Leo said hesitantly. "I got an email from Mom yesterday." Conrad's expression remained neutral, though his hand tightened imperceptibly around his wine glass. "What did she say?" "She wants me to come home. Says she misses me and that you're—" Leo trailed off uncomfortably. "I'm what?" Conrad prompted. "Manipulating me. Turning me against her." Leo met his father's gaze directly. "She says you're using your money to buy my affection." Conrad considered his response carefully. "And what do you think, Leo?" "I think she never bothered to see who I really was until I was gone," Leo answered, surprising Conrad with his insight. "She never encouraged my interest in architecture or supported my creative projects. She just wanted me to get perfect grades and follow the path she thought was best." "People are complex," Conrad offered. "Your mother isn't entirely wrong to want academic success for you." "It wasn't about me, though, was it?" Leo asked perceptively. "It was about how my success or failure reflected on her." Conrad nodded slowly. "That's very insightful. Are you still going to divorce her?" Leo asked, the question hanging heavily between them. "The paperwork has already been filed," Conrad confirmed. "Miranda has been instructed to proceed regardless of your mother's response." Leo was quiet for a moment. "I feel bad for her sometimes. I'm not sure she understands what she's lost." "That's the difference between consequences and punishment, Leo," Conrad explained. "I'm not punishing your mother. I'm simply allowing her to experience the natural consequences of her choices." Later that evening, after Leo had retired to his room, Conrad checked his secure messages. There was an update from Naomi that made him smile grimly. In Lakeside Heights, Stella Whitlock's world continued to crumble methodically, precisely as Conrad had planned. The country club had permanently revoked her membership after anonymous evidence surfaced of her berating the staff and making racist comments about guests. Carefully edited recordings from Conrad's surveillance that presented her worst moments without context. Her event planning business had collapsed after her most prestigious clients received anonymous portfolios detailing her affair with Bradford Dixon, complete with timestamps showing she had been with him during events she claimed to be managing. Most devastatingly, her parents, with whom she'd always had a strained relationship, had received a package containing video of Stella mocking them to Bradford, calling them small-town nobodies, and expressing relief that Conrad's modest income had given her an excuse to avoid spending holidays with them. The isolation Conrad had engineered was complete. Stella's friends had abandoned her once her social standing collapsed. Her lover was now bankrupted, his dealerships sold to a holding company Conrad secretly controlled. Her son was traveling the world with the husband she'd belittled for years, experiencing educational and cultural opportunities beyond anything she could have provided. Conrad picked up his phone and checked Stella's latest messages. She had sent 347 texts over the past 3 months, their tone evolving from rage to disbelief to desperate pleading. The most recent read, "Conrad, please. I'm begging you. Let me speak to Leo. Let me explain. I've lost everything. Please don't take my son too." Conrad left it unanswered, as he had all the others. He opened his laptop and navigated to a secure website where he could view the surveillance feeds from their house in Lakeside Heights. Stella was sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by empty wine bottles, staring vacantly at her phone, waiting for a response that would never come. Conrad felt no pleasure in her suffering, but neither did he feel remorse. He had simply constructed the perfect consequence for years of contempt, allowing Stella to experience the same isolation and dismissal she had inflicted on him and Leo. His phone chimed with a message from Miranda. Final phase ready to implement upon your approval. Conrad typed a simple response. Proceed. The next morning in Lakeside Heights, Stella was awakened by the doorbell. She staggered to the door, disheveled from another night of fitful sleep and too much wine, to find Miranda Powell standing on her doorstep, elegant as always in a tailored suit. Mrs. Whitlock, Miranda said coolly, I have some documents that require your attention. Stella stepped aside, wordlessly, to let her in. Over the past months, she had learned that fighting against Conrad's attorney was futile. Miranda Powell represented a system of power and privilege that Stella had once believed herself part of, but now recognized had always been beyond her reach. Miranda placed a thick envelope on the kitchen counter. These are the final divorce papers. My client has been quite generous, all things considered. You may keep the house and car, and he has established a modest trust that will provide you with $5,000 monthly for the next 10 years. Stella laughed bitterly. Generous? He's worth hundreds of millions. And as I've explained repeatedly, those assets are legally separate from marital property, Miranda replied evenly. Furthermore, your documented marital misconduct substantially weakens any claim you might make. The offer on the table is significantly more than you would receive if we litigated this matter. Stella's shoulders slumped in defeat. And Leo? Mr. Whitlock has been granted primary physical custody, with visitation rights for you to be determined based on Leo's preferences once he turns 16 next month. Miranda's tone softened slightly. For what it's worth, Mrs. Whitlock, Leo is thriving. His architectural talents are being nurtured by some of the field's greatest minds, and he's been accepted to a special program at the Architectural Association in London this fall. Tears welled in Stella's eyes. He always loved designing buildings. I thought it was just a hobby. Perhaps if you had taken more interest in his passion rather than focusing solely on his academic performance, you might have recognized his gifts sooner, Miranda observed, her tone clinically detached rather than accusatory. After Miranda left, Stella sat at the kitchen table with the divorce papers, her life reduced to legal language and financial settlements that felt like pittance compared to what she had lost. Her phone chimed with a text from Bradford, his first in weeks. It's over, Stella. I'm moving to Arizona to stay with my brother. Conrad won. He destroyed everything I built. Stella stared at the message, a hollow laugh escaping her lips. Conrad had indeed won, and so completely that neither she nor Bradford had even seen the true scope of his strategy until it was too late. She picked up her phone and typed one more message to Conrad. I understand now. You were never useless. I was just blind. I'm sorry. For the first time in 3 months, she received a response. Apology noted. Goodbye, Stella. In Barcelona, Conrad closed his phone and turned his attention back to Leo, who was eagerly showing him the sustainable urban development concept he'd created during Professor Garcia's workshop. This is really impressive, Leo, Conrad said sincerely, studying the intricate design. You have a remarkable talent. Leo beamed at the praise. Do you think we could visit London next? There's an exhibition at the Royal Institute of British Architects I'd love to see. London it is, Conrad agreed, putting his arm around his son's shoulders. The world is yours to explore, Leo. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. As they discussed their plans for London, Conrad felt a sense of completion. Phase 3 of his plan was now in motion, bringing his strategy full circle. Stella was isolated and humbled. Bradford was financially ruined. And most importantly, Leo was flourishing away from the toxic environment they had created. The mask Conrad had worn for so long was permanently discarded, allowing both him and Leo to finally live authentically. Whatever guilt he might have felt about the calculated destruction of Stella's life was outweighed by the knowledge that Leo would never again be made to feel inadequate by someone who should have nurtured his gifts. The strategist had played the long game and won decisively, as he always did. Chapter 7. New Foundations. 1 year had passed since Conrad and Leo had left Lakeside Heights. After completing their world tour, they had settled in London, where Leo had been thriving at the prestigious Architectural Association. Conrad had purchased a historic townhouse in Kensington and established a new headquarters for Phantom Investments nearby, finally stepping out of the shadows to take public credit for his financial achievements. On a crisp autumn morning, Conrad sat in his home office reviewing quarterly reports when his secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Miranda Powell. "Miranda, good morning," Conrad answered. "I trust everything is proceeding as planned." "Better than planned," Miranda replied. "The Bradford Dixon situation has been fully resolved. After the bankruptcy proceedings, we were able to acquire his remaining assets through our shell company for pennies on the dollar. His attempt to file a lawsuit claiming you orchestrated his downfall was dismissed for lack of evidence yesterday." "Excellent," Conrad said, making a note in his calendar. "And Stella?" "She's accepted the revised settlement terms," Miranda confirmed. "In exchange for the additional monthly stipend, she's agreed to waive all future claims and maintain confidentiality about your financial history. She's also agreed not to contact Leo unless he initiates communication." Conrad felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The final pieces of his strategic extraction from his former life were falling into place with the precision he'd envisioned. "Thank you, Miranda. Your work on this has been invaluable." After ending the call, Conrad found Leo in the townhouse's sunroom, working on an architectural model for his latest school project. "That looks impressive," Conrad observed, studying the intricate design. "Is this for Professor Harrington's sustainability challenge?" Leo nodded, carefully adjusting a miniature solar panel array on the model's roof. "It's a community center that generates more energy than it uses. I'm incorporating water reclamation systems and vertical gardens." Conrad smiled with genuine pride. In the years since they'd left Lakeside Heights, Leo had transformed from an anxious, underperforming student into a confident young architect in training whose designs had already won 2 student competitions. "I heard from Miranda this morning," Conrad said, taking a seat across from Leo. "The divorce is finally settled." Leo's hands stilled on his model. "How's Mom?" "Accepting the situation," Conrad replied carefully. "The agreement includes a provision that she won't contact you directly. Any communication would need to be initiated by you." Leo was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I'm not ready to talk to her yet. Maybe someday, but not now." "That's entirely your decision," Conrad assured him. "There's no rush." "Has she tried to contact you again?" Conrad hesitated before answering truthfully. "Yes. She sends messages occasionally, primarily about financial matters, but sometimes asking about you." What Conrad didn't share was the nature of Stella's most recent message, sent late at night with the desperation of someone who had lost everything. "I know what you did, Conrad. Not just to me, but to Bradford. You systematically destroyed both of us. Was it worth it? Did ruining our lives make you feel powerful?" He had left it unanswered, as he did most of her messages now. "I have some news of my own," Conrad said, changing the subject. "I've been invited to deliver a keynote address at next month's Global Investment Summit. I've decided to accept." Leo looked up in surprise. "Really? You're going public with everything?" "Not everything," Conrad clarified, "but I'm tired of operating exclusively from the shadows. It's time for Conrad Whitlock to take credit for his achievements." Later that afternoon, Conrad met with Naomi, who had relocated to London to continue as his chief of staff. They sat in his private study, reviewing the final reports on what Conrad still referred to as the Lakeside situation. "Bradford Dixon has moved to Phoenix," Naomi reported, consulting her tablet. "He's working as a sales manager at his brother's plumbing supply company. His attempt to rebuild in the automotive industry failed when our contacts made sure his loan applications were rejected." Conrad nodded, satisfied. "And the property?" "The former Dixon automotive locations have been successfully converted. 2 are now Tesla dealerships, and the 3rd is being developed as a technical training center for disadvantaged youth." Conrad allowed himself a small smile at the irony. Dixon's former flagship dealership from which he had orchestrated both financial fraud and his affair with Stella, was now providing opportunities for young people to build legitimate careers. And Stella's former clients? All successfully transferred to our preferred vendors, Naomi confirmed. Her attempts to rebuild her event planning business in Lakeside Heights have been consistently thwarted. As you predicted, the social isolation has been her most difficult adjustment. Conrad nodded, feeling no pleasure in this confirmation, but acknowledging the strategic success. And Leo's school records? All transferred and updated. His current transcript shows remarkable improvement, and Professor Harrington specifically mentioned his potential for a scholarship to the architectural graduate program at Cambridge. Pride swelled in Conrad's chest. He's extraordinary. All he needed was the right environment to flourish. As Naomi departed, Conrad poured himself a rare glass of scotch and stood by the window overlooking the garden where Leo was now sketching a section of the ornate Victorian greenhouse. The past year had unfolded almost exactly as Conrad had planned, a strategic dismantling of his false life and reconstruction of an authentic one. The revenge he had taken against Stella and Bradford had been meticulous and absolute, designed not merely to punish, but to systematically deconstruct the foundations of their existence, just as they had attempted to do to him and Leo with their emotional abuse and betrayal. Conrad's phone chimed with a message from a number he didn't recognize. The text was brief, but sent a chill through him. Revenge has a cost, Conrad, and bills always come due. B. For the first time since leaving Lakeside Heights, Conrad felt a flicker of unease. Bradford Dixon had been thoroughly defeated, financially ruined, socially disgraced, and legally compromised. He should have no resources left for threats. Conrad forwarded the message to his security team with instructions to trace its origin and increase surveillance on both Bradford and Stella. The strategist in him recognized that even the most brilliant plans could have unforeseen variables. As evening fell over London, Conrad joined Leo for dinner in their formal dining room, pushing the concerning message from his mind to focus on his son's animated description of his latest architectural inspiration. "I've been thinking about what you said about giving back," Leo said as they finished their meal. "About using privilege to create opportunity for others." "Oh," Conrad prompted, intrigued. "I'd like to establish a scholarship," Leo continued, "for students interested in sustainable architecture who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. We could fund it through the foundation you mentioned starting." Conrad felt a surge of pride, so intense it nearly overwhelmed him. The son he had rescued from a toxic environment had not only flourished himself, but was already thinking about extending that opportunity to others. "That's a wonderful idea, Leo. We'll set it up first thing tomorrow." Later that night, after Leo had retired to his room, Conrad received a call from his security chief. "Sir, we've traced the message. It didn't come from Bradford Dixon. It came from a burner phone purchased in London 3 days ago." Conrad's blood ran cold. "London? Are you certain?" "Positive, sir. The phone was used within 2 miles of your residence." Conrad immediately checked the security system, confirming that all entrances were secured and the alarm was active. Then he quietly walked to Leo's room, opening the door just enough to confirm his son was sleeping peacefully. Someone from his past had followed them to London. Someone with a grudge and enough resources to track them down despite their careful relocation. Conrad returned to his study and opened his laptop, accessing the secure server where he kept contingency plans for every conceivable threat. He had not built his fortune by being unprepared, and he would not risk Leo's safety by underestimating this new danger. Whoever had sent that message would soon discover that Conrad Whitlock's capacity for strategic ruthlessness had only begun to reveal itself. Chapter 8. Ghost from the Past. The mystery of the threatening text deepened over the following week. Conrad's security team traced the burner phone's movements through central London, but lost the trail when it was apparently discarded near Paddington Station. Enhanced security measures were implemented around both the townhouse and Leo's school, with plainclothes guards maintaining discreet surveillance. Conrad had not shared the threat with Leo, unwilling to disrupt the stability his son had found. Instead, he maintained his regular schedule, while quietly activating a network of contacts to investigate who might have followed them from Lakeside Heights. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Conrad was meeting with investors at Phantom's London headquarters when his secure line rang with Naomi's designated code. "Excuse me, gentlemen," he said smoothly to the venture capitalists gathered around his conference table. "I need to take this." In his private office, Conrad answered tensely. "What's happened?" "Sir, we've identified a possible security concern," Naomi reported. "A woman matching Stella's description was photographed by our surveillance system near Leo's school yesterday. She didn't approach the building, but she observed it for approximately 20 minutes before departing in a taxi." Conrad's grip tightened on the phone. "Confirm it's her. Then have the security team bring her to the Belgravia safe house. No interaction with Leo, understood?" "Understood, sir." Conrad ended the call, his mind already calculating probabilities and consequences. Stella had never been particularly resourceful or determined. For her to track them to London and conduct surveillance suggested either a dramatic change in character or external assistance. The threatening text message took on new significance in this context. Could Bradford Dixon be coordinating with Stella from Phoenix? The timing seemed more than coincidental. Conrad returned to his meeting, maintaining his composed exterior while his mind worked through contingency scenarios. If Stella had indeed come to London, she had violated the non-contact agreement in their divorce settlement. That gave him legal leverage, but it didn't explain how she had found them or what she hoped to accomplish. Later that evening, Conrad received confirmation from his security team. Facial recognition had verified Stella's identity from the surveillance footage. She was staying at a mid-range hotel in Bayswater under her maiden name, Morrison. "Should we proceed with interception, sir?" his security chief asked over the secure line. Conrad considered the options. Confronting Stella directly might provide answers, but could also escalate the situation unpredictably. Maintain surveillance for now, he decided. I want to know who she contacts, where she goes, and especially if she attempts to approach Leo again. After ending the call, Conrad went to check on Leo, finding him engrossed in a complex CAD design in his home workspace. "Working late?" Conrad asked casually. Leo looked up with a tired smile. "Final revisions for the Sustainable Housing Project. Professor Harrington thinks it has potential for the Buckminster Fuller Prize." Conrad's chest swelled with pride, even as his concern for Leo's safety intensified. His son had flourished beyond his expectations, once freed from Stella's constant criticism and pressure to conform to her narrow vision of success. "Don't stay up too late," Conrad advised, resisting the urge to warn Leo about potential danger. "Your presentation is important, but so is rest." The next morning, Conrad was reviewing security footage from overnight monitoring when his phone chimed with another text from the unknown number. "Your son's design project is impressive. The vertical garden integration is particularly innovative. Does he know about his mother yet?" B. A cold rage settled in Conrad's chest. Not only was the sender aware of Leo's architectural work, but they had specifically referenced Stella's presence in London. This was no longer a vague threat, but a targeted provocation. Conrad immediately called his security chief. "Bring Stella in. Now." Within 2 hours, Conrad stood in the sparsely furnished living room of a nondescript townhouse in Belgravia that served as one of his secure locations. His security team had intercepted Stella leaving her hotel and brought her there without incident. She sat on the sofa, looking both defiant and somehow diminished from the confident, status-obsessed woman he had married. Her designer clothes had been replaced by off-the-rack items, and her once perfect manicure was noticeably absent. "Hello, Stella," Conrad said flatly. "I believe our divorce agreement included a no-contact provision regarding Leo." Stella met his gaze directly. "I haven't contacted him. I just wanted to see him from a distance. To know he's all right." "He's thriving," Conrad replied coldly. "No thanks to your years of undermining his confidence and dismissing his talents." "I made mistakes," Stella admitted, surprising Conrad with her directness. "I was wrong about many things, including you." Conrad's expression remained impassive. "Your regrets are irrelevant. What concerns me is how you found us and who you're working with. Confusion flickered across Stella's face. Working with? I'm not working with anyone. I hired a private investigator to find you. That's all. And the texts? Conrad pressed. Are you going to deny sending those as well? What texts? Conrad, I don't know what you're talking about. Conrad studied her carefully. Either Stella had become an exceptional actress, or she genuinely didn't know about the threatening messages. Before he could pursue this line of questioning, his phone rang with his security chief's emergency code. Excuse me, he said tersely, stepping into the adjoining room. What is it? Sir, we have a situation at Mr. Leo's school. The security chief reported urgently. A man attempted to approach him as students were changing classes. Our operative intercepted him before contact was made. The man fled, but dropped his phone. It matches the one used to send the texts. Conrad's blood ran cold. Is Leo safe? Yes, sir. Our operative ensured he remained unaware of the incident. The school has been notified of a potential security concern without specifics. I want the surveillance footage immediately and increase Leo's security detail to 3 operatives effective immediately. Conrad ended the call and returned to where Stella waited, his mind racing with possibilities. If she wasn't behind the texts, and Bradford Dixon was supposedly in Phoenix, who did you hire to find us? Conrad demanded. Stella blinked at his sudden intensity. A private investigator recommended by Bradford. His name was Nolan something. He specialized in international cases. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Conrad had been so focused on Stella as the potential threat that he'd overlooked the possibility of a more sophisticated player in the background. When did you last communicate with Bradford? Conrad asked. About 2 months ago, Stella replied. He said he had a lead on where you might have gone after your world tour. That's when he recommended Nolan. Conrad's tactical mind quickly recalculated. Bradford Dixon had more resources than anticipated, possibly through family connections or undiscovered assets. More importantly, he had cunningly used Stella as an unwitting distraction while positioning someone else, presumably this Nolan, to approach Leo directly. Conrad turned to his security chief, who had entered the room. I want everything we have on Bradford Dixon's family connections, particularly any with military or intelligence backgrounds. And I want a full background check on any private investigator named Nolan who specializes in international cases. Turning back to Stella, Conrad made a rapid decision. You're going to remain in our custody until this situation is resolved. Your presence in London has complicated matters significantly. Custody? Stella repeated incredulously. You can't just hold me prisoner, Conrad. I can and I will, Conrad replied without emotion. You violated our agreement by coming here. More importantly, you've inadvertently placed Leo in danger by leading Bradford's operative to him. As Stella processed this accusation, Conrad's phone chimed with another text message. This one made his blood freeze. The game changes now, Conrad. Your protection isn't as thorough as you think. If I can get this close to Leo once, I can do it again. Let's discuss terms. Nolan. Attached was a photo taken that very morning of Leo entering his school, clearly shot from close range without Conrad's security team detecting the photographer. Conrad showed the message to his security chief, whose expression darkened. Sir, this level of surveillance suggests professional training, possibly former intelligence or special forces. Conrad nodded grimly. Find out exactly who we're dealing with. And move Leo to the safe house in Cornwall immediately. Use the school emergency protocol we established. As his team sprang into action, Conrad turned back to Stella, whose face had paled upon seeing the photo of Leo. I didn't know, she whispered. Conrad, you have to believe me. I would never put Leo in danger. Intentionally? Perhaps not, Conrad conceded. But your resentment and Bradford's desire for revenge have created this situation nonetheless. Later that evening, Conrad sat in the secure communications room of his Kensington townhouse, monitoring the transport of Leo to the remote Cornwall property. The extraction had gone smoothly, with Leo told only that a credible security threat required temporary relocation. His security team had compiled preliminary information on Nolan Reese, the operative Bradford had hired. The picture it painted was concerning. Former British intelligence, with specialized training in surveillance and extraction, dishonorably discharged for unauthorized operations, and subsequently working as a high-end private contractor for clients willing to pay for morally ambiguous services. Conrad's phone rang with a call from an unlisted number. He activated the call tracing protocol before answering. "Whitlock," he said tersely. "Impressive security response today," came a smooth, cultured voice. "Your son was relocated within 3 hours of the incident. Professional work." "Nolan Reese," Conrad replied, signaling his team to continue the trace. "Bradford Dixon must be paying you well for this level of operation." Dixon provided the motivation and initial funding. Reese confirmed casually. "But I've developed a personal interest in this case." "You're quite the strategic mind, Conrad. The way you systematically dismantled Dixon and your ex-wife was artistry." "What do you want?" Conrad demanded, keeping Reese talking while the trace continued. "Originally, to help Dixon get evidence of your financial manipulations. Now, I'm more interested in testing my skills against someone of your caliber. It's rare to find a worthy opponent." The casual arrogance in Reese's tone sent a chill through Conrad. This wasn't a simple revenge mission anymore. It had evolved into something potentially more dangerous, a personal challenge from a trained operative who viewed the situation as an intellectual game. "Then you should know you're outmatched," Conrad replied coldly. "I've identified you. I know your background, and my resources far exceed anything Dixon could provide." Reese chuckled. "That's why this is interesting. Here's my proposal. I'll cease all operations targeting your son in exchange for £10 million transferred to an offshore account. Consider it a consulting fee for exposing the weaknesses in your security protocols." Conrad's security chief signaled that they had triangulated Reese's location to within 2 city blocks. "You've miscalculated, Reese," Conrad said, his voice dangerously soft. "I don't negotiate with threats to my family. What I do is eliminate them, permanently and thoroughly." "Bold words," Reese replied, sounding amused rather than concerned. "We'll see whose strategy prevails. Give my regards to Stella." The line went dead just as Conrad's team pinpointed Reese's exact location. "Deploy the interception team," Conrad ordered. "I want Reese contained within the hour." As the security personnel mobilized, Conrad turned to the surveillance feed showing Stella in the safe house's secured guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed, her posture reflecting defeat and confusion. Conrad had dismissed her as a direct threat, but she remained a liability, a potential point of leverage Reese could exploit. The strategic move would be to isolate her completely until the situation was resolved. Yet for the first time since executing his revenge against Stella and Bradford, Conrad felt a flicker of something approaching doubt. Not about the justice of his actions. Their betrayal had earned the consequences he delivered, but about the collateral damage his strategy had created. In targeting Bradford Dixon so completely, Conrad had inadvertently created a desperate man with nothing left to lose. That desperation had led to the hiring of Nolan Reese, who now posed a legitimate threat to Leo's safety. The strategist in Conrad recognized the irony. His perfect revenge had created an unforeseen vulnerability, exactly the scenario he had built his business success on avoiding. As he monitored the interception team's progress toward Reese's location, Conrad made a cold calculation. This threat would not be managed through conventional security measures alone. It would require the same methodical, ruthless approach he had applied to dismantling Stella and Bradford's lives. Nolan Reese had made a critical error in challenging Conrad Whitlock directly. He was about to discover just how thoroughly the silent strategist could respond when his son's safety was at stake. Chapter 9. The Final Calculation. The Cornwall safe house resembled a picturesque country estate from the outside, its stone walls and manicured gardens concealing state-of-the-art security systems and reinforced construction. Conrad arrived by helicopter shortly after dawn, having spent the night coordinating the manhunt for Nolan Reese. The interception team had missed Reese by minutes, finding only the burner phone he'd used to call Conrad left deliberately on a park bench. The psychological warfare aspect was clear. Reese was demonstrating his ability to anticipate Conrad's moves. Conrad entered the main house to find Leo in the sunroom, sketching the dramatic coastline visible through the windows. Despite the hasty relocation, his son appeared calm, a testament to the resilience he'd developed over the past year. "Morning, Dad," Leo greeted him, looking up from his sketch pad. "Your security team runs a tight ship. Blake wouldn't even let me walk in the garden without an escort." Conrad managed a reassuring smile. "Just precautionary. How are you holding up?" Leo shrugged. "It's not every day you get whisked away to a secret mansion because of a security concern. Are you going to tell me what's really happening?" Conrad had prepared for this question during the helicopter flight. Leo deserved some version of the truth, even if not every detail. "Someone from our past in Lakeside Heights has been making threats," Conrad explained, taking a seat across from Leo. "We have reason to believe they might attempt to approach you." Leo studied his father's face intently. "Mom, no, though she's involved indirectly," Conrad admitted. "She's actually here in a separate wing of the house." Leo's eyebrows shot up. "Mom's here? Since when?" "Since yesterday. She came to London hoping to see you, which inadvertently led someone else to your school." Leo was silent for a moment, processing this information. "The person making threats, it's connected to what you did to Mom and Mr. Dixon, isn't it?" Conrad had consistently underestimated his son's perceptiveness. "Yes. It appears Mr. Dixon hired someone to gather information that could be used against me legally. That person has now gone beyond his original assignment." "Can I see Mom?" Leo asked unexpectedly. Conrad hesitated. "Is that something you want?" "I'm not sure," Leo admitted. "But I think I need to. It's been over a year, Dad." After a moment's consideration, Conrad nodded. "I'll arrange it, but I need to speak with her first." In a secured meeting room, Conrad faced Stella across a polished oak table. She looked exhausted, but had regained some of her composure since their confrontation in London. "Leo wants to see you," Conrad stated without preamble. "Before I allow that, I need absolute clarity about your involvement with Reese." "I've told you everything," Stella insisted. "Bradford recommended him. I paid him to find you and Leo. That's all." "Did you discuss revenge with Bradford? Exposing my financial dealings?" "Anything that might have motivated Reese to go beyond simply locating us." Stella hesitated, confirming Conrad's suspicion that she wasn't being entirely forthcoming. "Bradford mentioned something about proving you had manipulated financial markets to destroy his business," she finally admitted. "He thought if we could get evidence, we might be able to negotiate a better settlement. But I never authorized anything that would put Leo at risk." Conrad studied her, weighing the likelihood that she was telling the truth. "Bradford's desire for revenge has created a dangerous situation. Reese is not merely a private investigator. He's former intelligence with specialized training. The kind of man who views this as a game rather than a job." Fear flickered across Stella's face. "What does he want?" "Money, supposedly. But I suspect his motivation has evolved into something more personal, a desire to match wits with someone he perceives as a worthy opponent." "What are you going to do?" Conrad's expression hardened. "What I've always done when faced with a threat to my family. Identify the vulnerabilities and exploit them decisively." Before Stella could respond, Conrad's secure phone rang with his security chief's code. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away from the table. "Go ahead." "Sir, we've intercepted communications between Reese and Dixon. Dixon appears to be en route to London, arriving Heathrow tomorrow morning on BA Flight 289 from Phoenix." "Interesting timing," Conrad observed. "Have a team ready to intercept Dixon at the airport and continue monitoring Reese's known associates. He'll need local support for whatever he's planning." After ending the call, Conrad returned to Stella. "It seems Bradford is more deeply involved than you suggested. He's flying to London as we speak." Stella's surprise appeared genuine. "I had no idea. He told me he couldn't afford to travel internationally anymore." "Apparently he found resources for this particular trip," Conrad replied dryly, "which raises questions about his true financial situation and what he hopes to accomplish by coming here personally." A theory was forming in Conrad's mind. one that explained both Reese's psychological warfare approach and Bradford's sudden appearance. This wasn't merely about revenge or money. It was about reversing the power dynamic Conrad had established through his systematic dismantling of their lives. "I'll arrange for you to see Leo this afternoon," Conrad told Stella, making a rapid strategic decision. "In the meantime, I'd like you to call Bradford." Stella looked confused. "Call him? Why?" "To find out exactly what he's planning," Conrad replied. "He still believes you're working with him. Use that." Later that day, after Stella's supervised call to Bradford had confirmed Conrad's suspicions, Leo sat in the same meeting room, nervously awaiting his mother. Conrad had prepared him with a sanitized version of events, emphasizing that while Stella had made poor choices, she had never intended to put him in danger. When Stella entered, her composure momentarily faltered at the sight of her son. Leo had grown taller, his features more defined, carrying himself with a confidence that had been absent in Lakeside Heights. "Leo," she said softly, "you look wonderful." Leo remained seated, his expression guarded. "Hi, Mom." Conrad observed their reunion from the security monitoring room, watching the awkward conversation unfold. Stella attempted to bridge the gap of the past year with questions about Leo's studies and life in London. Leo answered politely, but maintained an emotional distance that clearly pained her. "Your father tells me you've been accepted into a special program at the Architectural Association," Stella said. "Try to connect." "That's amazing, Leo. You always said architecture wasn't a real career path," Leo replied evenly. "That I was wasting my time with those silly building designs." Stella winced at having her words quoted back to her. "I was wrong about a lot of things, Leo, including that." As the conversation continued, Conrad's security chief entered the monitoring room with an update. "Sir, the team intercepted Dixon at Heathrow as planned. He's being transferred to our secondary location for questioning." Initial search of his belongings found this. He handed Conrad a thumb drive in an evidence bag. Preliminary analysis suggests it contains sophisticated malware designed to penetrate financial systems, similar to tools used in state-sponsored hacking operations. Conrad's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Reese isn't just hunting for evidence of my financial manipulations. He's planning to plant it. The strategy was elegant in its simplicity. If Reese couldn't find legitimate proof of Conrad's supposed financial crimes, he would manufacture it, using Bradford as the delivery mechanism. The goal wasn't merely revenge, but complete reversal. To frame Conrad for the very type of market manipulation and fraud that he had exposed in Bradford's business operations. "Increase security protocols on all Phantom investment systems immediately," Conrad ordered, "and prepare the conference room. I want to speak with Dixon personally." An hour later, Conrad faced Bradford Dixon across a table in the secure conference room. The once flashy car dealer looked diminished, his designer suit replaced by casual travel clothes, his confident demeanor eroded by a year of financial and social destruction. "Hello, Bradford," Conrad greeted him coolly. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Bradford attempted a defiant sneer that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about, Whitlock." Conrad placed the thumb drive on the table between them. "This sophisticated piece of malware that Nolan Reese gave you to plant in my financial systems." Did he explain that it would create false evidence of market manipulation that could be tracked back to my accounts? Or did he simply tell you it would get the evidence you needed? Uncertainty flickered across Bradford's face. "You've been targeting me for over a year. Destroyed my businesses, ruined my reputation. All because I fell in love with your wife." Conrad's laugh was devoid of humor. "Love? Is that what you call it? You pursued a married woman because you thought she was the wife of a financially struggling advisor, an easy conquest who would be impressed by your flashy lifestyle and apparent success. That's not. When you discovered my true financial status, your interest evolved from mere infidelity to strategic opportunity." Conrad continued relentlessly. "Don't insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise." Bradford's facade cracked further. "You systematically destroyed everything I built." "No, Bradford. I simply exposed what you had already corrupted through your own actions. The financial fraud at your dealerships predated my involvement by years. The tax evasion was your choice. I merely ensured the appropriate authorities became aware of it. Conrad leaned forward slightly. But that's not why you're here. You're here because Nolan Reese convinced you that you could reverse our positions, frame me for financial crimes using this malware, then expose me the way I exposed you. Bradford's silence confirmed Conrad's assessment. What you fail to consider is that Reese has his own agenda, Conrad continued. Once he realized the extent of my resources, this became a game to him, a chance to test his skills against someone he considers a worthy opponent. You're merely a pawn in his actual strategy. He promised me revenge, Bradford said weakly. A chance to rebuild. At what cost? Conrad asked pointedly. Did he mention that his approach has endangered Leo? That he's been conducting surveillance on a 14-year-old boy? Bradford's expression shifted, genuine concern breaking through his resentment. Despite his many flaws, Conrad had observed that Bradford had always treated Leo with kindness during his relationship with Stella. I never agreed to anything involving Leo, Bradford insisted. The plan was just to get evidence of your financial manipulations. Yet here we are, Conrad replied coldly. With my son under protection because your operative decided to escalate the situation into personal territory. Conrad pushed a document across the table. This is a complete confession detailing your involvement with Reese, including the planned cyber attack on my financial systems. Sign it, and I'll ensure you return to Phoenix with enough resources to start over, far from my family. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to pursue this as an attempted cybercrime with all the legal consequences that entails. Bradford stared at the document, then at Conrad. And Reese. Reese is my concern, not yours. After Bradford signed the confession, Conrad had him escorted to a secure location where he would remain until the situation with Reese was resolved. With one liability contained, Conrad turned his full attention to the more dangerous threat. The psychological profile his team had compiled on Nolan Reese suggested a man motivated by intellectual challenge rather than mere financial gain. This presented both a vulnerability and an opportunity. Reese's ego could be leveraged against him. Conrad instructed his security team to leak information suggesting that Leo was being moved to a different safe house, a classic misdirection play that would appeal to Reese's intelligence background. Meanwhile, Conrad implemented the final phase of his counter-strategy. That evening, as Conrad reviewed the security arrangements with his team, Leo entered his temporary office in the Cornwall estate. I spoke with Mom, Leo said, taking a seat across from his father. She told me some things about what happened in Lakeside Heights, about how you systematically dismantled her life and Mr. Dixon's after we left. Conrad studied his son carefully. Yes, I did. She says you destroyed her reputation, isolated her socially, and bankrupted Mr. Dixon's businesses as revenge for how they treated you. That's a simplified version, but essentially accurate, Conrad confirmed, not attempting to sugarcoat his actions. Leo was quiet for a moment. The same strategic thinking you use in business, you used against them. Yes, and now someone's using similar tactics against you, Leo observed. Doesn't that make you question whether your approach was right? Conrad considered his response carefully. The difference is intent, Leo. I never endangered innocent people in my actions against your mother and Bradford. This man, Reese, has chosen to target you. Someone completely uninvolved in the original conflict. Leo nodded slowly. I understand the difference. I'm trying to reconcile the father I've come to know this past year with someone capable of such calculated destruction. I won't apologize for protecting you from people who are causing you harm, Conrad said firmly. Your mother's constant criticism and dismissal of your talents was damaging you in ways that became clear only after we left. Bradford's relationship with her directly contributed to that toxic environment. So what happens now? Leo asked. With this Reese person? He'll be dealt with, Conrad replied simply. And then we'll return to our lives in London. And Mom. Conrad sighed. That's partly up to you, Leo. If you want a relationship with her, I won't prevent it. But it would need to be structured carefully to ensure she doesn't return to her previous patterns of behavior. Later that night, Conrad received the call he'd been anticipating from his security team leader. Target took the bait, sir. Reese attempted to access the decoy safe house location. He's been apprehended and is being transported to the secure facility now. Excellent. I'll speak with him in the morning. At dawn, Conrad entered the interrogation room where Nolan Reese was being held. The former intelligence operative presented a stark contrast to Bradford Dixon, calm, composed, and showing no signs of stress despite his captivity. Mr. Whitlock, Reese greeted him with unexpected cordiality. I wonder when you'd make an appearance. Mr. Reese, Conrad replied, taking a seat across from him. I believe we have matters to discuss. Reese smiled thinly. Indeed, though I must compliment your team on the elegant misdirection play. The leaked transport plans were convincing enough to warrant investigation, yet contained subtle inconsistencies that should have alerted me. A test within a test. Impressive. You mistake me for someone interested in playing games, Conrad said coldly. You targeted my son. That was your fatal error. Business, Mr. Whitlock. Bradford Dixon paid for results. And yet you escalated beyond his parameters, developing what your communications described as a personal interest in the case. Conrad produced a folder containing printed emails between Reese and his associates. That's when this ceased to be business and became something else entirely. Reese's expression remained neutral, but Conrad detected a flicker of surprise at the revelation that his communications had been compromised. Your methods with Dixon and your ex-wife were artwork, Reese admitted. I recognized a kindred strategic mind. Few people appreciate the elegance of systematic deconstruction. Here's what happens next, Conrad said, ignoring the attempt at establishing common ground. The evidence of your planned cyber attack has been secured. Bradford Dixon has provided a signed confession detailing your involvement. I have 3 options regarding your fate. Reese raised an eyebrow, still maintaining his composure. I'm listening. Option 1. I turn you over to British authorities with evidence of your planned cyber crimes, your surveillance of a minor, and your history of unauthorized operations that led to your dishonorable discharge. Given your background, you'd face significant prison time. Messy and public, Reese observed. Not your typical approach. Option 2. I use my resources to ensure you never work in private security again. Your reputation would be systematically destroyed among potential clients. Your financial accounts will be frozen through various legal mechanisms. You would effectively cease to exist professionally, following your established playbook. More elegant, I grant you. Option 3, Conrad continued. You sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement, accept a one-time payment of £1 million, and disappear permanently from my family's life. Any future contact, direct or indirect, would trigger immediate implementation of Option 2. Reese studied Conrad thoughtfully. A generous offer, considering the circumstances. Though I'm curious why you'd choose such a clean resolution rather than the more thorough destruction you applied to Dixon. Because unlike Bradford, you're merely a professional who overstepped, Conrad replied. Your error was in personalizing what should have remained a business transaction. I'm offering you the opportunity to correct that error. After a calculated pause, Reese nodded. Option 3 has obvious appeal, though I must admit some disappointment at not seeing how our chess match might have concluded under different circumstances. It concluded the moment you targeted my son, Conrad stated flatly. Everything since has been mere execution of an inevitable outcome. Later that day, with Reese's situation resolved through the signed NDA and financial transfer, Conrad made his final strategic decision regarding Stella. After consulting with Leo, who had expressed cautious interest in maintaining limited contact with his mother, Conrad offered Stella a revised arrangement. You'll return to Lakeside Heights, he informed her in his temporary office at the Cornwall estate. The monthly stipend will continue as established in our divorce agreement. Additionally, I've arranged for you to be offered a position with the Henderson Foundation, a legitimate role managing their charitable events, not a handout. Stella looked surprised at this unexpected development. Why would you do that after everything that's happened? Because despite your mistakes, you're still Leo's mother, Conrad replied evenly. He's expressed interest in maintaining some relationship with you, which would be facilitated by your having stable employment and social standing. And the conditions? Stella asked perceptively. Complete confidentiality regarding my financial history and the events of the past year. Monthly sessions with a family therapist before any in-person visits with Leo. An absolute acceptance that any attempt to undermine Leo's confidence or choices will result in immediate termination of all contact. Stella was silent for a moment before responding. You've thought of everything, as usual. I protect what matters to me, Conrad stated simply. Leo matters. His well-being is non-negotiable. And us? Will there ever be anything beyond these calculated arrangements? Conrad's expression remained impassive. There is no us, Stella. There hasn't been for years. What remains is a pragmatic arrangement focused solely on Leo's well-being. 3 days later, with the situation fully resolved, Conrad and Leo returned to their London townhouse. Bradford Dixon had been escorted back to Phoenix with enough capital to start a modest business unrelated to automotive sales, bound by legal agreements that would ensure his permanent distance from Conrad's family. Nolan Reese had disappeared as agreed, his threat neutralized through the combination of financial incentive and potential consequences. Stella had returned to Lakeside Heights to begin her new position with the Henderson Foundation, with arrangements made for monitored video calls with Leo as a first step toward rebuilding their relationship under careful supervision. As Conrad and Leo settled back into their London routine, Leo approached his father in the study one evening. Dad, can I ask you something? Conrad looked up from his work. Of course. Do you ever regret how thoroughly you dismantled Mom and Mr. Dixon's lives? Not the fact that you did it, but the extent of it. Conrad considered the question thoughtfully. Regret implies I would make different choices if given another opportunity. I wouldn't. The strategy one implemented was precisely calibrated to the situation. Even though it ultimately created this danger with Reese, every strategy has potential second-order consequences, Conrad explained. The art is in anticipating them and having contingencies ready. The Reese situation was managed because we were prepared for such possibilities. Leo nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something Mom said, that you never forgive anyone who betrays you. That's largely accurate, Conrad admitted. I believe consequences should match actions. Your mother and Bradford betrayed my trust in profound ways over an extended period. The consequences reflected that reality. What about me? Leo asked quietly. What if I make mistakes or disappoint you someday? Conrad's expression softened immediately. Leo, there's a fundamental difference between mistakes and betrayal. Everyone makes mistakes. They're how we learn and grow. Betrayal is a deliberate choice to harm someone who trusts you. I can't imagine a scenario where you would make such a choice. Leo seemed reassured by this distinction. So the strategic mastermind has a heart after all, he said with a small smile. Only for you, Conrad replied simply. Always for you. As Leo returned to his architectural studies, Conrad reflected on the events of the past year. The mask of mediocrity he had worn for so long in Lakeside Heights had been permanently discarded. The strategic mind that had built his financial empire had been fully revealed, both in business and in his methodical dismantling of those who had betrayed him. The silent strategist had emerged from the shadows, his true nature now known to those who mattered. For Conrad Whitlock, this was the only victory that had ever truly mattered, the freedom to be himself completely, and to ensure his son could flourish in an environment where his talents were recognized and nurtured. The rest, the revenge, the countermeasures, the strategic maneuvering, had been merely the necessary means to that essential end. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Perfect Facade. Wayne Snyder stood at his kitchen window, watching the sunrise paint the suburban landscape in golden hues. At 42, he maintained the lean, disciplined physique of his former military days, though 15 years had passed since he'd left the Special Forces. His steel-gray eyes reflected a hardness that most people mistook for quiet intensity, never suspecting the calculated predator that lurked beneath his composed exterior. The Snyder household appeared perfect from the outside, a sprawling two-story colonial in the affluent Brookhaven neighborhood, manicured lawns, luxury cars in the driveway. Wayne had built this life methodically after leaving the military, using his specialized skills to establish a private security consultancy that catered to high-profile clients. What most people didn't know was that Wayne's consultancy extended far beyond conventional security services. "Morning, honey." Rebecca Snyder glided into the kitchen, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. At 38, she maintained an artificial beauty through expensive procedures and designer everything. Her voice carried the practiced sweetness of someone who'd learned early that manipulation was more effective than honesty. Wayne nodded without turning around. "Coffee's fresh." Rebecca poured herself a cup, adding an excessive amount of cream. A small indulgence she allowed herself while maintaining her figure through other means. "Miranda's been acting strange lately. All this talk about independence and keeping her own money. I think your military discipline rubbed off on her a little too much." Their 20-year-old daughter Miranda had recently landed her first real job as a junior accountant at a local firm. Unlike her younger brother Luke, who was 22 and still living at home while finding himself, Miranda had always shown the drive and integrity that reminded Wayne of his younger self. "She's earned the right to make her own decisions," Wayne replied, finally turning to face his wife. "It's her money." Rebecca's smile faltered slightly. "Family comes first, Wayne. You know that. With Luke's expenses and the house payments." "Luke's expenses?" Wayne's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You mean his gambling debts? His DUI attorney fees? His rehab that he walked out of after 3 days?" Before Rebecca could respond, Luke stumbled into the kitchen, reeking of alcohol and wearing yesterday's clothes. His sandy hair was disheveled, and his bloodshot eyes avoided his father's gaze. Where Miranda had inherited Wayne's discipline and Rebecca's beauty, Luke had gotten Rebecca's entitlement and none of Wayne's strength. "Morning," Luke mumbled, heading straight for the coffee. "It's afternoon," Wayne observed coldly. Luke shrugged, a gesture that embodied his approach to responsibility. "Whatever. Mom, I need $5,000. There's this investment opportunity." "No." Wayne's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. Rebecca stepped between them, her hand on Luke's shoulder. "We can discuss it later, sweetheart. Why don't you go shower?" Luke shot his father a resentful look before shuffling out. Wayne watched him go, noting how Rebecca's eyes followed their son with concern while she barely acknowledged Miranda's achievements. "He's trying, Wayne. He just needs time to mature. He's 22. I was leading men in combat at his age." Rebecca's laugh was sharp. "Not everyone can be a war hero, Wayne. Some people need more support." The conversation was interrupted by Miranda's arrival. She moved with purpose, dressed professionally in a charcoal gray suit that she'd bought with her own money. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her green eyes, Wayne's eyes, held a determination that made him proud. "Morning, Dad." "Rebecca." Miranda never called Rebecca Mom anymore, a subtle rebellion that hadn't gone unnoticed. "Sweetheart." Rebecca's voice took on a different tone, calculating. "I wanted to talk to you about your salary. With the family's financial situation." "My salary is mine," Miranda interrupted, pouring coffee into a travel mug. "I'm saving for an apartment." Rebecca's mask slipped slightly. "Family obligations come first, Miranda. Your grandfather always taught us that children support their parents, not the other way around." Wayne watched the exchange with growing interest. He noticed the tension building over the past weeks, but this was the first time Rebecca had been so direct. "Grandpa Ronald can share his wisdom with Luke," Miranda replied coolly. "I'm not funding anyone's lifestyle." The kitchen fell silent. Wayne saw something flicker across Rebecca's face. Anger, frustration, and something else. Something that looked almost desperate. "We'll discuss this tonight," Rebecca said finally, her voice tight. "When your grandfather comes for dinner." Miranda left without another word, and Wayne found himself studying his wife with new attention. In 15 years of marriage, he'd learned to read people's motivations, their tells, their weaknesses. Rebecca was hiding something, and for the first time, Wayne wondered what other secrets lay beneath their perfect facade. As Rebecca busied herself with unnecessary kitchen tasks, Wayne noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly. She glanced at it nervously, then quickly silenced it without checking the messages. "Everything all right?" Wayne asked casually. "Of course," Rebecca replied too quickly. "Just the yoga instructor confirming today's session." Wayne nodded, filing the information away. In his line of work, lies were as obvious as flashing neon signs. The question was, what was Rebecca lying about, and how deep did it go? That afternoon, Wayne sat in his home office, ostensibly reviewing client files, but actually thinking about the morning's interactions. His instincts, honed by years of combat and covert operations, were telling him that something was fundamentally wrong in his household. His secure phone rang, the one only his most exclusive clients used. "Snyder." "Wayne, it's Edmund Ware. I need a consultation." Edmund was an old Army buddy who transitioned into private investigation. Their friendship went back to Afghanistan, where they both learned that sometimes the mission required methods that couldn't be documented in official reports. "What's the situation?" "Surveillance job. High-profile divorce case. The wife's been smart about covering her tracks, but the husband has resources and patience." "Interested." Wayne glanced at a photo on his desk. Rebecca and the kids at last year's Christmas party, all smiles and perfect poses. "Send me the details. I'll review them tonight." After hanging up, Wayne sat back in his leather chair, a plan beginning to form in his mind. If Rebecca was hiding something, his professional skills were perfectly suited to uncovering it. And if she was betraying their family, well, Wayne had never left a mission incomplete. The house felt different as evening approached. Rebecca was unusually anxious, checking her appearance multiple times and ensuring everything was perfect for her father's visit. Luke remained in his room, probably sleeping off his hangover. Only Miranda seemed normal, though Wayne caught her watching Rebecca with suspicious eyes. Ronald Marks arrived at 6 sharp, his silver Mercedes gleaming in the driveway. At 70, Rebecca's father remained an imposing figure, tall, distinguished, with silver hair and expensive suits that spoke of old money and older values. He'd built a small empire in real estate, though Wayne had always suspected that some of Ronald's business dealings existed in legal gray areas. "Wayne." Ronald's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "Good to see you, son." "Ronald." Wayne returned the grip with precisely the right amount of pressure, enough to show strength, not enough to challenge. Dinner was a tense affair. Ronald dominated the conversation with stories of business victories and subtle criticisms of anyone who didn't meet his standards of success. Luke hung on every word, desperate for approval. Rebecca played the perfect hostess, ensuring everyone's needs were met while carefully steering conversation away from any controversial topics. Miranda, however, seemed to be building towards something. "Grandfather," she said during dessert, "I wanted to thank you for the advice about financial independence. My first paycheck means a lot to me." Ronald smiled approvingly. "Hard work and family values, Miranda. That's how the Marks family built our success." Speaking of family values, Rebecca interjected smoothly. "Miranda and I were discussing how she might contribute to the household expenses. After all, she's benefiting from living here rent-free." Wayne watched Miranda's face carefully. Her jaw tightened, but her voice remained controlled. "I pay for my own car, insurance, clothes, and personal expenses. I eat maybe 5 meals a week here. What exactly am I supposed to contribute to?" "Attitude, young lady." Ronald's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "Your mother has sacrificed everything for this family. The least you can do is show some gratitude." "Sacrificed everything?" Miranda's composure finally cracked. "Like what?" "Her yoga sessions? Her shopping trips? Her spa appointments?" Rebecca's face flushed red. "I run this household, Miranda. I manage everyone's schedules, maintain our social obligations. You delegate the cleaning to a service, order takeout 3 nights a week, and spend most afternoons doing God knows what while Luke destroys his life and Dad works 14-hour days. The dining room exploded into chaos. Luke tried to defend his mother, his words slurring slightly. Ronald's voice boomed about respect and family hierarchy. Rebecca's voice rose to a shrill pitch about ungrateful children. Through it all, Wayne remained silent, watching, analyzing, cataloging every reaction and revelation. Then Miranda said the words that changed everything. "I'm keeping my salary. If you want money so badly, ask your boyfriend for it." The room went dead silent. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Foundation. The silence that followed Miranda's accusation stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Wayne felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. The same predatory calm that had served him in combat zones where split-second decisions meant life or death. Rebecca's face cycled through expressions: shock, anger, fear, and finally, defiant calculation. "I don't know what you're implying, Miranda, but—" "I'm not implying anything." Miranda stood, her hands steady despite the emotional minefield she'd just detonated. "I'm stating a fact. I've seen the texts, the late-night phone calls, the receipts for restaurants Dad never goes to." Ronald Marks rose from his chair like an Old Testament patriarch preparing to deliver judgment. "This is preposterous. Rebecca would never, wouldn't she?" Miranda's voice carried a steel that reminded Wayne painfully of himself. The same Rebecca who married Dad for his military benefits and life insurance. The same Rebecca who spent 15 years bleeding him dry while contributing nothing except complaints and demands. Luke stumbled to his feet, alcohol making him brave and stupid in equal measure. "You can't talk to Mom like that." "Dad, tell her." Wayne finally spoke, his voice quiet but carrying absolute authority. "Luke, sit down." Something in Wayne's tone made Luke comply immediately. Wayne's attention turned to his daughter, and for the first time in months, he saw her clearly, not as the child she'd been, but as the woman she'd become. Strong, observant, uncompromising. Everything Rebecca wasn't. "What exactly did you see, Miranda?" Rebecca jumped in before Miranda could answer. "Wayne, you can't seriously be entertaining this ridiculous." "I wasn't talking to you." Wayne's words cut through Rebecca's protest like a scalpel. "Miranda?" Miranda reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I used Mom's printer last week when mine was broken. This was in the tray." She handed Wayne a restaurant receipt. Chez Laurent, one of the most expensive French restaurants in the city. 2 entrees, champagne, dessert. The date was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday when Wayne had been working late and Rebecca had claimed to be having dinner with her book club. But it was the signature at the bottom that made Wayne's blood turn to ice. Brandon Devine. Wayne knew that name. Brandon Devine was a local real estate developer, notorious for his predatory business practices and his appetite for married women. Wayne had actually done background checks on Devine 2 years ago for a client who suspected Devine was sleeping with his wife. The irony wasn't lost on him. "One receipt doesn't prove anything," Ronald said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Business dinners happen all the time in real estate. What business would Mom have with Brandon Devine?" Miranda asked. "She doesn't work. She doesn't invest. She doesn't do anything except spend Dad's money and complain about how hard her life is." Rebecca's mask was finally slipping completely. "You little bitch. After everything I've done for you." Wayne stood slowly, and the movement commanded instant attention. At 6'2", and possessing the controlled grace of a natural predator, Wayne could dominate a room without saying a word. When he did speak, his voice was conversational, almost friendly. "Rebecca, I think you should choose your next words very carefully." Something in Wayne's tone made Rebecca step back. For 15 years, she'd seen him as a provider, a protector, sometimes an obstacle to overcome. But she'd never seen him as what he truly was, a man who'd killed people for his country and would do far worse for his family. I don't know what Brandon Devine is talking about," Rebecca stammered. "Maybe he was trying to impress someone by using my name." "Mom," Miranda's voice was almost pitying, "I followed you last Thursday to the Riverside Hotel. You were there for 3 hours." The admission hung in the air like a death sentence. Wayne felt the last pieces of his marriage crystallizing into something brittle and disposable. "You followed me?" Rebecca's voice reached a register that suggested genuine panic. "I wanted to be wrong," Miranda said simply. "I hope you were just, I don't know, having a midlife crisis. Buying expensive clothes or getting secret plastic surgery. Anything except what you were actually doing." Ronald Marks had gone completely silent, his face pale. Luke was staring at his mother with something approaching horror, his alcohol-addled brain finally grasping the implications. Wayne walked to his home office, leaving the family tableau frozen in the dining room. When he returned, he carried a small device that he placed on the table. "What's that?" Rebecca asked. "Recording equipment," Wayne said matter-of-factly. "I had it installed in your car last month." Professional curiosity. The lie came easily. Wayne hadn't bugged Rebecca's car yet, but her reaction would tell him everything he needed to know. Rebecca's face went white. "You've been spying on me?" "Only since I started noticing irregularities in our household accounts. Money disappearing. Credit card charges that didn't match your explanations. A husband tends to notice when his wife starts lying to him." "I haven't been lying." Rebecca's voice cracked. "I would never." Wayne pressed a button on the device, and Rebecca's voice filled the room. "I can't keep doing this, Brandon. Wayne's getting suspicious. Maybe we should take a break until..." Wayne pressed the button again, stopping the playback. The recording was fabricated, a simple audio manipulation he'd learned during his intelligence training. But Rebecca didn't know that. That's not. Rebecca looked around the room desperately, searching for support that wasn't coming. Ronald Marks spoke first, his voice heavy with disappointment and something else, fear. "Rebecca, tell me this isn't true." "Daddy, don't call me Daddy." Ronald's voice turned cold. "You're a grown woman who's apparently been conducting herself like a common whore." Luke made a choking sound, whether from the alcohol or the revelation. Wayne couldn't tell. Miranda stood and moved to Wayne's side, a gesture that wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "Dad, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." Wayne looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw strength, loyalty, and integrity. Everything he'd tried to instill in both his children, but only Miranda had embraced. "Rebecca," Wayne's voice was still conversational, but everyone in the room could feel the danger radiating from him. "I'm going to ask you one question, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer." "How long?" Rebecca's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, she whispered, 6 months. The admission confirmed what Wayne had already suspected, but hearing it aloud triggered something deep and primal in his psyche. 6 months of lies. 6 months of betrayal. 6 months of Rebecca laughing at him behind his back while spending his money and destroying his family. "And Luke?" Wayne asked quietly. "What about Luke?" Rebecca asked, confused. "Does he know?" Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Wayne turned to his son, who was staring at the floor with the intensity of someone trying to disappear entirely. "Luke, I didn't know for sure," Luke mumbled. "I mean, I saw some stuff, but I hoped." "You hope what?" "That you could keep taking money from a man your mother was cheating on." Luke's face crumpled. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have told you, but Rebecca promised you more money if you kept quiet." Wayne's voice carried no emotion, which somehow made it more terrifying. Luke's nod was barely perceptible. Wayne looked around the dining room, at his wife who'd betrayed him, his son who'd helped her do it, his father-in-law who'd raised a daughter with no moral compass, and his daughter who'd been the only one with enough integrity to tell him the truth. "Everyone except Miranda needs to leave my house. Now." "Wayne, please." Rebecca started forward, but Wayne's expression stopped her cold. "You have 1 hour to pack essential items. Your car will be returned to the dealership tomorrow morning. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your access to our joint accounts has been terminated. Any attempt to remove items of significant value will be treated as theft. You can't just throw me out." Rebecca's voice turned shrill. "I have rights. We have 15 years of marriage. We had 15 years of marriage. Past tense." Wayne's voice remained calm, controlled, final. "You terminated it when you decided to fuck Brandon Devine." Ronald Marks cleared his throat. "Wayne, perhaps we could discuss this privately." "No, Ronald. Your daughter made adult choices. She can live with adult consequences. Dad. Luke's voice was small, frightened. What about me? Wayne looked at his son, really looked at him, and felt a mixture of disappointment and something approaching pity. You chose your side, Luke. You can live with your mother and her boyfriend. But I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not my problem anymore. Miranda stepped forward. Dad, maybe we should. Wayne's expression softened slightly when he looked at her. Miranda, you're welcome to stay as long as you want. This is your home. But these three made their choices. Rebecca made one last desperate attempt. Wayne, please. We can work this out. Counseling, therapy. Wayne's laugh was soft and absolutely terrifying. Rebecca, you seem to have forgotten who I am, what I'm capable of. You've made the worst mistake of your life, and you don't even realize it yet. Something in Wayne's tone made everyone in the room understand that this wasn't just about divorce or separation. This was about consequences. The kind of consequences that Wayne Snyder specialized in delivering. As Rebecca, Luke, and Ronald filed out of the dining room to pack, Wayne remained seated at the table, his mind already working through the implications and possibilities. Miranda sat down beside him. Dad, are you okay? Wayne looked at his daughter, the only family member who'd remained loyal, who'd chosen truth over comfort, integrity over easy money. I'm perfect, sweetheart. But Rebecca and her friends are about to learn that crossing a Snyder has consequences they can't possibly imagine. The warmth in Wayne's voice when he spoke to Miranda contrasted sharply with the cold calculation in his eyes as he watched Rebecca pack her bags. The war was about to begin. Chapter 3, The Line in the Sand. Wayne stood at his bedroom window, watching Rebecca load her Mercedes with an efficiency that spoke of careful planning. It was barely past midnight, but she moved with purpose, her earlier tears replaced by a calculating determination that reminded Wayne why he'd never fully trusted her. What she didn't know was that Wayne had been watching her for weeks. The surveillance hadn't been motivated by suspicion initially. Wayne's security consultancy required him to maintain certain skills, and he'd taken to practicing his tracking and observation techniques on random targets. Rebecca had simply been convenient. But convenience had turned to revelation when Wayne had followed her to the Riverside Hotel 3 weeks ago. He'd watch her enter room 237 and documented the arrival of Brandon Devine 15 minutes later. He'd photographed Devine's Jaguar, recorded the license plate, and even managed to obtain audio samples of their conversations through directional microphones aimed at the hotel room window. Wayne's military intelligence training had made him thorough in ways that civilian investigators couldn't match. Now, as Rebecca finished packing, Wayne reviewed the comprehensive file he'd compiled on her affair. Photos, audio recordings, financial records showing money transferred to accounts Rebecca thought he didn't know about, even surveillance footage from her visits to an apartment that Devine maintained for his extramarital activities. The evidence was overwhelming, professionally gathered, and legally inadmissible in any court of law. Wayne preferred it that way. Courts had rules, judges, appeals processes. Wayne's brand of justice was more direct. A soft knock on his door interrupted his planning. Come in. Miranda entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing an expression of concern that reminded Wayne of his own mother. Thought you might need this. Wayne accepted the coffee gratefully. How are you holding up? Better than I expected. Miranda settled into the chair by Wayne's desk. I keep thinking I should feel worse about destroying our family, but you didn't destroy anything, sweetheart. You just revealed damage that was already there. Miranda sipped her coffee thoughtfully. What happens now? Wayne studied his daughter's face, noting the intelligence in her eyes, the steel in her posture. She wasn't asking about divorce proceedings or custody arrangements. She was asking about consequences. That depends on what they do next, Wayne said carefully. Rebecca and Devine have made certain choices. Now they get to live with the results. And Luke, Wayne's expression hardened. Luke chose to participate in his mother's betrayal. He could have come to me at any time over the past 6 months, but he chose money over family. That has consequences too. Miranda nodded slowly. He's weak. He always has been. Weakness I could forgive. Betrayal is different. They sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. watching Rebecca make trips to her car. Wayne noted that she was taking more than just personal items, jewelry, artwork, even some of the silver that had been wedding gifts. "She's stealing from us," Miranda observed. "I know." Wayne's voice carried a note of satisfaction. "I'm documenting everything. For the divorce?" Among other things. Miranda looked at her father with new understanding. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" Wayne met his daughter's gaze directly. "Miranda, I want you to understand something about your father. I spent 15 years in special operations. I've been to places and done things that most people can't imagine. I've learned that the world is divided into two types of people, those who keep their word and those who break it." He stood and walked to his gun safe, entering the combination with practiced efficiency. Inside, Miranda could see an array of weapons that went far beyond typical home defense needs. "Your mother broke her word to me. She broke her word to our family. She involved Luke in her betrayal and tried to manipulate you into funding their lifestyle while she destroyed everything we built together." Wayne selected a pistol from a safe, a Glock 19 that showed signs of extensive use and careful maintenance. "People like that don't just stop, Miranda. They don't learn from consequences. They learn from fear." "Dad," Miranda's voice carried a note of concern. Wayne turned to face her, the weapon held with casual familiarity. "I'm not going to kill anyone, sweetheart. But Rebecca and her friends are going to learn that actions have consequences. Real ones." A car door slammed outside. Rebecca was finished packing. "She'll be back," Wayne said confidently. "Tonight was just the opening move. Rebecca thinks she can manipulate this situation like she's manipulated everything else in her life. She's wrong. How do you know she'll be back?" Wayne smiled, and for the first time since the dinner revelation, the expression reached his eyes. "Because I know Rebecca better than she knows herself. She's greedy, entitled, and fundamentally weak. Right now, she's probably planning how to get half of everything I own while keeping Devine as her backup plan." Wayne returned the pistol to the safe and closed it. "She's going to try to play victim, claim I'm abusive or threatening. She'll probably file for divorce and demand alimony, child support for Luke, maybe even try to claim she's entitled to part of my business." "Can she do that?" "She can try. But Rebecca has made a crucial mistake. She's assumed that I'm bound by the same rules that constrain normal people." Wayne's voice carried a cold amusement. "She's about to learn otherwise." As if summoned by their conversation, Wayne's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed Edmund's number. "Wayne, sorry to call so late. Got some interesting information about that surveillance job we discussed." "Go ahead." "Brandon Devine has some very interesting financial arrangements, the kind that certain federal agencies might find fascinating." Wayne felt a predatory smile spread across his face. "How interesting. The kind that could make someone's life very complicated very quickly. Want to discuss it in person?" "Tomorrow morning." "My office." After hanging up, Wayne found Miranda watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Dad, what are you planning?" Wayne considered his answer carefully. Miranda was no longer a child, and she'd proven her loyalty beyond question. She deserved the truth. "Rebecca destroyed our family because she thought I was weak, predictable. Someone who would follow conventional rules and legal procedures while she and her boyfriend laughed at me behind my back." Wayne moved to his computer and opened a file labeled Devine, Brandon, Personal. The screen filled with photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. She was wrong. I've been building a file on Brandon Devine since the day I confirmed their affair. His business practices, his personal habits, his weaknesses, his fears. Everything. Miranda leaned forward to look at the screen. "How did you get all this?" "Professional connections, specialized skills, resources that most people don't have access to." Wayne scrolled through the documents. "Devine thinks he's untouchable because he has money and political connections. He's about to discover that those things mean nothing when someone with my particular skill set decides to destroy him." "And Mom?" Wayne's expression grew cold. "Rebecca made her choice. She chose money over family, lies over truth, betrayal over loyalty. Now she gets to live with a man who's about to lose everything he owns." "What about Luke?" "Luke is an adult who chose to participate in his mother's betrayal. He'll learn that choices have consequences. Miranda was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she asked, "Do you want me to help?" Wayne looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw something that surprised him. Not fear or disapproval, but determination. The same steel that had driven her to confront Rebecca despite knowing the consequences. "Miranda, what I'm planning to do might cross certain legal lines. Are you sure you want to be involved? They tried to steal from me too, Dad. Mom wanted my entire salary to fund their affair while Luke gambled away your money. They treated me like a bank account with legs." Miranda's voice carried a cold anger that reminded Wayne uncomfortably of himself. "Besides, someone has to make sure you don't go too far." Wayne laughed, a genuine sound of pleasure and pride. "In that case, yes, I could use your help. What do you need me to do?" Wayne pulled up another file on his computer. "First, I need you to apply for a restraining order against Luke." "What? Why?" "Because Luke is going to become desperate when Devine's world starts falling apart. Desperate people do stupid things. A restraining order will establish a paper trail showing that we had reason to fear him." Miranda's eyes widened with understanding. "You're creating justification for whatever comes next," Wayne confirmed. "Because when I'm finished with Brandon Devine and the people who helped him destroy my family, they're going to wish they'd never heard the name Snyder." Outside, Rebecca's Mercedes disappeared into the night, carrying her toward a future she couldn't possibly imagine. Wayne watched the taillights fade, then turned back to his planning. The war had officially begun. Chapter 4. The investigation deepens. Wayne's office occupied the entire top floor of a converted warehouse in the industrial district, a location chosen for its privacy rather than prestige. The space reflected its owner's personality, functional, efficient, and equipped with technology that most government agencies would envy. Edmund were arrived at 8 sharp, carrying a briefcase and wearing the grim expression of someone bearing unpleasant news. At 45, Edmund retained the lean build and alert eyes of his military days, though his prematurely gray hair suggested the kind of stress that came with their particular line of work. "Coffee." Wayne gestured toward a machine that looked more suited to a laboratory than an office. "God, yes. I've been up all night putting this together." Wayne prepared 2 cups, while Edmund opened his briefcase and spread documents across the conference table. The files painted a picture of Brandon Devine that was far more complex and dangerous than Wayne had initially realized. "Start with the basics," Wayne said, settling into his chair. "Brandon Devine, 39, divorced twice, no children. Owns Devine Development, which specializes in luxury residential projects. On paper, he's worth about $12 million. Edmund pulled out a photograph of Devine, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of artificial charm that appealed to women like Rebecca. The reality is more interesting. Devine Development is hemorrhaging money. 3 major projects are behind schedule and over budget. He's leveraged to the hilt with some very unforgiving creditors." Wayne studied the financial documents. "How unforgiving? The kind that collect debts with crowbars." Edmund's voice was grim. "Devine owes approximately $4 million to various investors, most of whom have connections to organized crime. The Torino family has particular interest in seeing their money returned." Wayne felt a cold satisfaction settle in his chest. "How long does he have?" 6 months, maybe less. He's been juggling payments, selling assets, probably stealing from new projects to pay for old ones. It's a classic Ponzi scheme waiting to collapse." "And Rebecca?" Edmund produced another set of documents. "That's where it gets interesting. Your wife has been meeting with Devine for 8 months, not 6. She lied about the timeline." Wayne wasn't surprised. Rebecca's lies had layers, like an onion that revealed fresh deceptions with each peeling. "More importantly," Edmund continued, "she's been feeding him information about your business. Client lists, financial projections, even details about your military background." The betrayal went deeper than Wayne had imagined. "What kind of details?" "Enough that Devine has been telling people he has connections in the security consulting world. He's been using your reputation to attract investors." Wayne's hands remained steady as he poured more coffee, but Edmund recognized the signs of controlled rage from their military days. "There's more, isn't there? Rebecca has been accessing your business accounts. Small amounts transferred to cash accounts that she thinks you don't monitor. About 40,000 over the past 6 months. I monitor everything. Wayne's voice was conversational, but Edmund heard the promise of violence underneath. I know, which is why I assume you have records of every transaction. Wayne nodded. Rebecca's financial betrayal gave him additional legal leverage, but more importantly, it confirmed that she'd been planning this for far longer than her supposed 6-month affair. What about Luke? Edmund's expression darkened. Your son has been gambling again. High-stakes poker games, sports betting, some online casino sites. He's into a local bookmaker for about 60,000. 60,000? Wayne felt something cold settle in his stomach. Where would he get that kind of credit? That's the problem. He's been using your name as collateral, telling people his father is good for his debts. Wayne stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline while processing this new information. Luke hadn't just betrayed him. He'd put Wayne's reputation and possibly his safety at risk. Who's the bookmaker? Sergei Kozlov. Operates out a nightclub downtown. Russian mob connections. Very serious about debt collection. Wayne turned back to Edmund. Timeline. Kozlov expects payment within 2 weeks, or he starts collecting in other ways. Other ways. Broken bones. Burned property. Whatever it takes to make his point. Wayne felt the familiar calm that preceded violent action. Luke put me at risk without my knowledge or consent. That changes things. Edmund recognized the tone. Wayne, whatever you're planning. What I'm planning is to protect my family and my business from the consequences of other people's betrayals. Wayne returned to his seat. What else do I need to know? Edmund produced a final set of documents. Devine has been telling people that he's planning to marry a wealthy widow. Someone with connections and money who can help him solve his financial problems. Rebecca. He's been promising investors that his new partner will bring significant capital to his next project. He's essentially selling your wife's divorce settlement before she even files. Wayne laughed, a sound with no humor in it. They're both in for a surprise. There's one more thing. Edmund's voice carried a warning. Rebecca has been meeting with a divorce attorney. Patricia Hawkins, the one who specializes in taking wealthy men apart. Wayne knew the name. Patricia Hawkins had a reputation for scorched earth tactics and massive settlement demands. She was also rumored to use private investigators who weren't particular about legal boundaries. Yesterday afternoon, 3 hours after she left your house, Wayne processed this information. Rebecca was moving faster than he'd anticipated, which meant his response needed to be equally swift. Edmund, I need you to do something for me. Name it. I want comprehensive surveillance on Rebecca, Luke, and Devine. Everything. Where they go, who they talk to, what they buy. Full documentation. That's expensive and time-consuming. I don't care about expense. And I need it done by professionals who understand that this information might be used in ways that courts wouldn't approve of. Edmund was quiet for a moment, understanding the implications. Wayne, if you're planning what I think you're planning, I'm planning to protect my family and my assets from people who have demonstrated that they can't be trusted with either. Wayne's voice carried absolute finality. Are you going to help me or not? Edmund sighed and closed his briefcase. What do you need? Wayne spent the next 2 hours outlining his requirements. By the time Edmund left, Wayne had commissioned the kind of surveillance operation that would have impressed federal agencies and terrified anyone who discovered they were under its scope. Alone in his office, Wayne pulled up the security system for his house and reviewed the footage from the previous night. Rebecca had been busy while packing. She'd accessed his home office, photographed documents, and even attempted to open his gun safe. The woman who'd claimed to love him for 15 years had been documenting everything she could use against him in a divorce proceeding. Wayne's secure phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Snyder. Mr. Snyder? This is Patricia Hawkins. I represent your wife in certain legal matters. Wayne had been expecting this call. Ms. Hawkins, I think it would benefit both parties if we could discuss a reasonable resolution to this situation. My client is willing to be generous in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. How generous? Half of all marital assets, ongoing alimony, and a reasonable settlement for the emotional trauma she's endured. Wayne's smile was predatory. And what emotional trauma would that be? The trauma of discovering that her husband has been conducting surveillance on her, threatening her with weapons, and creating a hostile home environment. Wayne recognized the strategy. Rebecca was establishing a narrative of abuse to justify her affair and maximize her settlement. Ms. Hawkins, I think you should advise your client to be very careful about the accusations she makes. I have resources for verifying facts that might surprise you. Is that a threat, Mr. Snyder? It's information. Good day, Ms. Hawkins. Wayne hung up and immediately called Edmund. The attorney already contacted me. They're moving fast. How fast? Rebecca's planning to file tomorrow morning. Divorce, restraining order, the works. She's claiming domestic abuse and demanding immediate possession of the house. Wayne felt his careful plans accelerating. Then we accelerate too. I need that surveillance package tonight, not tomorrow. Wayne. Tonight, Edmund. Whatever it costs. After hanging up, Wayne sat back in his chair and considered his options. Rebecca had forced his hand by involving attorneys and making false accusations. The gloves were officially off. Wayne opened his computer and began typing a message to select contacts, people from his military days who transitioned into various forms of private security work. The kind of people who understood that sometimes problems required solutions that existed outside conventional legal boundaries. The message was simple. Personal situation requires immediate assistance. Standard rates plus 20% bonus. Discreet operators only. Within an hour, Wayne had confirmations from 6 different specialists, each offering unique skills that would prove invaluable in the coming conflict. Rebecca wanted to play hardball. She was about to discover that Wayne Snyder had been playing that game professionally for 20 years. Chapter 5. Setting the board. Wayne's house felt different after Rebecca's departure. Cleaner somehow, as if her removal had cleared away a poisonous atmosphere that had been building for months. Miranda moved through the space with newfound confidence, no longer walking on eggshells around her mother's volatile moods. At 6 a.m., Wayne received the surveillance package Edmund had promised. The overnight operation had yielded a treasure trove of information that painted Rebecca and her co-conspirators in an even worse light than Wayne had imagined. Miranda joined him in his office, carrying coffee and wearing the same expression of determined focus that had impressed Wayne since the dinner confrontation. "What did they find?" she asked, settling into the chair across from his desk. Wayne opened the files on his computer screen. Rebecca spent the night at Brandon Devine's apartment. But they weren't alone. The surveillance photos showed Luke arriving at Devine's building at midnight, clearly intoxicated and carrying what appeared to be documents. "What kind of documents?" Miranda asked. "From the surveillance footage, it looks like financial records. Probably more information about my business that Rebecca asked him to steal." Miranda's expression hardened. They're working together. All 3 of them. It gets worse. Wayne opened another file. Luke met with Sergei Kozlov yesterday afternoon. The conversation was brief, but based on body language analysis, Luke was begging for more time. And Kozlov gave him 1 week. If Luke doesn't pay his $60,000 debt, Kozlov starts collecting from family members. Miranda went pale. "He threatened you?" "By extension, yes. Luke's gambling debts are now a direct threat to our safety and my business reputation." Wayne closed the file and turned to face his daughter. "Miranda, I need to ask you something important. Are you prepared for this situation to get dangerous?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that Rebecca, Luke, and Devine have involved us with organized crime figures who resolve disputes through violence. I'm going to have to respond in kind." Miranda was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "You're talking about hurting people." "I'm talking about protecting my family and my business from people who have demonstrated that they're willing to use any means necessary to destroy both." "Including Luke?" Wayne's expression grew cold. "Luke stopped being my son when he chose to put gambling debts in my name without my consent. Now he's a threat that needs to be neutralized." Miranda nodded slowly. "What do you need me to do?" Wayne pulled up a new document on his computer. "First, we're going to file a police report about the theft of business documents and personal property. Establish a legal record of their activities." "Will the police actually do anything?" "Probably not immediately, but it creates documentation that will be useful later. Wayne printed several forms. We're also going to visit your bank and establish new accounts that Rebecca can't access or trace. She's been monitoring my accounts? According to the surveillance, she accessed your bank's online portal yesterday, using information she stole from your computer. She's been tracking your salary deposits and spending patterns. Miranda's face flushed with anger. She was planning to steal from me, too. Rebecca has been planning a lot of things. But she made a crucial mistake. She assumed I would react like a normal person going through a normal divorce. Wayne stood and walked to his gun safe, removing a small device that looked like a modified smartphone. This is a signal detector. It sweeps for electronic surveillance devices. You think they bugged the house? I think they're desperate enough to try anything. Wayne activated the device and began sweeping the office. Rebecca knows I keep important documents here. If she could monitor our conversations, it would give her a significant advantage in divorce proceedings. The device immediately began beeping near Wayne's desk phone. Wayne examined the device carefully, then smiled with predatory satisfaction. Amateurs. He removed the bug, a cheap commercial device that could be purchased online, and held it up for Miranda to see. They planted this yesterday while we were having dinner. Luke probably did it while we were focused on Rebecca's revelation. So they heard everything we said last night, only what I wanted them to hear. Wayne's smile was cold and calculating. I've been sweeping this room for surveillance devices twice daily since I started suspecting Rebecca. This bug was planted in an obvious location with inferior equipment. Miranda looked confused. I don't understand. It means they know I've been planning something, but they don't know what. They'll be operating from incomplete information while I have comprehensive intelligence on their activities. Wayne destroyed the bug and returned the detector to his safe. Miranda, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do will probably destroy several people's lives. Rebecca, Luke, Devine, possibly others. Are you certain you want to be involved? Miranda's response was immediate and firm. They try to destroy our lives first. I'm with you. Wayne felt a surge of pride and something approaching affection for his daughter. She'd inherited his steel spine and moral clarity, traits that Rebecca and Luke entirely lacked. In that case, we have work to do. The next several hours were spent implementing the first phase of Wayne's plan. They visited 3 different banks, establishing accounts in Miranda's name that utilized sophisticated privacy protections Wayne had learned during his military service. They filed police reports documenting the theft of business documents and personal property. They met with Wayne's attorney to discuss asset protection strategies that assumed a hostile divorce proceeding. Throughout the day, Wayne's phone buzzed with updates from his surveillance team. Rebecca was meeting with her divorce attorney again. Luke was attempting to pawn items stolen from Wayne's house. Devine was in frantic meetings with creditors who were becoming increasingly impatient. By afternoon, Wayne was ready to implement the next phase of his plan. Where are we going? Miranda asked as Wayne pulled his truck out of their driveway. To introduce ourselves to Sergei Kozlov. Miranda's eyes widened. The man Luke owes money to. The man Luke owes money to in my name, Wayne corrected. I think it's time we had a conversation about that debt. The Midnight Blue nightclub occupied a converted warehouse in the industrial district, its exterior deliberately unremarkable to avoid attracting unwanted attention. Wayne parked across the street and spent several minutes studying the building's entrances, security cameras, and the types of vehicles in the parking lot. Stay in the truck, Wayne instructed. If anything goes wrong, drive away immediately. What could go wrong? Wayne checked the pistol concealed under his jacket. Kozlov might not appreciate my approach to debt resolution. Wayne walked across the street with the confident stride of someone accustomed to entering dangerous situations. The 2 security guards at the entrance were large, professional, and clearly armed. They watched Wayne approach with the alert attention of people who'd seen violence and weren't intimidated by the possibility. Club doesn't open until 9, one of them said as Wayne reached the door. I'm here to see Sergei about a business matter. You got an appointment? Wayne pulled out his military identification card. Not the civilian version, but the one that identified him as a former Special Forces operator with classified clearances. Tell Sergei that Wayne Snyder is here about Luke Snyder's debt. Tell him I'm here to discuss a payment plan." The guard examined the identification with evident surprise, then spoke quietly into a radio. After a brief conversation, he stepped aside. "Third floor. Mr. Kozlov is expecting you." Wayne entered the club, noting the layout, security positions, and potential exit routes with the automatic assessment of someone trained for combat operations. The building had been modified extensively, with reinforced doors, surveillance equipment, and the kind of defensive preparations that suggested its owner took security seriously. Sergei Kozlov's office occupied the entire third floor, accessed by a private elevator that required a key card. Wayne was escorted by 2 additional security personnel who were polite but clearly prepared for trouble. Kozlov himself was not what Wayne expected. Instead of the stereotypical Russian mobster, he found a thin, elegant man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and speaking with barely accented English. His office was tastefully appointed with legitimate business awards and photographs that suggested extensive community involvement. "Mr. Snyder," Kozlov rose from behind an antique desk. "Please sit. I understand you wish to discuss your son's financial obligations." Wayne remained standing. "I want to discuss the fact that my son incurred a debt using my name without my knowledge or consent." Kozlov's smile was polite but dangerous. "Your son assured me that his family would honor his commitments. He spoke quite specifically about your ability to pay." "My son is a gambling addict who hasn't lived in my house in 24 hours and will never use my name for credit again." Kozlov studied Wayne with the calculating gaze of someone accustomed to reading men's characters. "Yet here you are, discussing his debt. I'm here to clarify that I am not responsible for Luke's poor decisions. However, I'm prepared to resolve this situation in a way that protects my business reputation." "How generous of you." Wayne reached into his jacket, slowly, keeping his hands visible, and removed a folded document. "This is a restraining order preventing Luke from using my name, accessing my property, or claiming any association with my business. It becomes effective tomorrow morning." Kozlov examined the document with evident interest. "Very thorough, but it doesn't address the existing debt." "No, it doesn't." Wayne's voice carried a note of finality. "Luke owes you $60,000. I suggest you collect it from him, his mother, or her boyfriend. But any attempt to collect from me or my legitimate family members will be treated as a threat requiring defensive action." Kozlov's expression grew very serious. "Mr. Snyder, you seem to be under the impression that you can dictate terms to me." Wayne's smile was cold and absolutely terrifying. "Mr. Kozlov, you seem to be under the impression that I'm just another worried father trying to protect his son. Let me clarify the situation." Wayne leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow made his words more threatening. "I spent 15 years in special operations. I've killed people professionally. I currently operate a security consultancy that handles problems for clients who value discretion over legality." Wayne straightened, his eyes never leaving Kozlov's face. "Luke Snyder is no longer my son. He's a gambling addict who betrayed his family and put my business at risk. If you have a problem with him, I suggest you solve it. But any attempt to involve me will result in consequences that neither of us want." Kozlov was quiet for a long moment, clearly reassessing the situation. Finally, he spoke. "Your son told me you were a veteran. He didn't mention what kind. Luke doesn't know what kind. My family has never needed to know the details of my previous work. Until now." "Until now," Wayne agreed. Kozlov returned the restraining order documents. "Mr. Snyder, I appreciate your directness. However, I have a business to run and debts to collect. Your son's gambling problem is not my concern." "Agreed. But his debt is his problem, not mine. What if I were to suggest an alternative arrangement?" Wayne's expression sharpened. "What kind of arrangement?" "Your son has been telling people that his family has connections, resources. Perhaps we could discuss a business relationship that would be mutually beneficial." Wayne recognized the offer for what it was, an opportunity to involve his security consultancy in Kozlov's less legitimate business activities. "I don't work with people who threaten my family. And I don't waste time on people who can't pay their debts." Kozlov's smile was sharp. "However, I do respect professional competence. Consider this. Your son's debt disappears, and you gain a client who pays very well for specialized services. Wayne pretended to consider the offer while mentally cataloging every detail of Kozlov's office, security arrangements, and personal demeanor. I'll think about it, Wayne said finally. But Luke's debt remains his responsibility until I make a decision. Fair enough. You have 1 week to decide. Wayne left the nightclub with the satisfaction of having established clear boundaries while gathering intelligence on another player in the complex game that Rebecca and Luke had forced him to enter. Back in the truck, Miranda looked at him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. How did it go? Wayne started the engine and pulled into traffic. Kozlov is smarter and more dangerous than I expected, but he's also practical. He won't come after us unless Luke does something exceptionally stupid, which he probably will, which is why we're going to make sure Luke's stupidity becomes Devine's problem instead of ours. Wayne's phone buzzed with a text message from Edmund. Emergency meeting. 1 hour. Important developments. Wayne sighed and changed direction toward Edmund's office. Phase 1 of his plan was complete, but it appeared that Rebecca and her allies had some surprises of their own. The war was escalating faster than Wayne had anticipated, which meant it was time to escalate his response accordingly. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Edmund's office felt like a war room, maps and photographs covering every available surface. When Wayne and Miranda arrived, they found Edmund studying surveillance photos with the intensity of someone preparing for battle. Tell me, Wayne said without preamble. Edmund looked up, his expression grim. Rebecca filed for divorce this morning, along with a restraining order and emergency motions for exclusive possession of your house and immediate access to your business accounts. Wayne felt the familiar calm that preceded violence. On what grounds? Domestic violence, financial abuse, and credible threats of harm. Edmund spread the legal documents across his desk. She's claiming you threatened her with weapons, conducted illegal surveillance, and created a hostile environment that forced her to seek safety elsewhere. Miranda made a disgusted sound. Every word of that is a lie. Legally, it doesn't matter, Edmund continued. She has a very expensive attorney who specializes in these tactics. The restraining order hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Wayne studied the documents, noting Patricia Hawkins' signature and the detailed allegations that revealed intimate knowledge of his professional background. She's using my military service against me. It gets worse. Edmund produced another set of papers. Devine has filed a police report claiming you've been stalking him and threatening his business relationships. Wayne laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Based on what evidence? Photographs of you near his apartment building, records of you researching his business activities, and testimony from Luke claiming you've been planning violent retaliation. The implications were clear. Rebecca, Devine, and Luke had been coordinating their attacks, using Wayne's own investigation against him while establishing themselves as victims. There's more. Edmund's voice carried a warning. Kozlov called me an hour ago. Luke approached him this morning with a proposition. What kind of proposition? Luke offered to provide detailed information about your security business in exchange for debt forgiveness. Client lists, operational procedures, personal details about your background. Wayne felt something cold and dangerous settle in his chest. Luke wasn't just betraying his family. He was actively sabotaging Wayne's livelihood and potentially endangering his clients. Did Kozlov accept? He wanted to check with you first. Professional courtesy. Wayne appreciated Kozlov's approach, but the damage was already done. Luke had demonstrated that he would sell anyone's safety for his own convenience. Miranda, Wayne turned to his daughter. I need you to go home and pack essential items. We're leaving town for a few days. What? Why? Because this situation is about to become very dangerous, and I need you somewhere safe while I handle it. Miranda's expression hardened. I'm not running away, Dad. We started this together, and we're finishing it together. Wayne studied his daughter's face, seeing the same stubborn determination that had driven her to confront Rebecca despite knowing the consequences. Miranda, what I'm about to do will cross lines that can't be uncrossed. People are going to get hurt. Some of them might not survive. Good. Miranda's voice carried a cold anger that reminded Wayne of himself. "They've been trying to destroy our family for months. Maybe it's time they learned what that feels like." Edmund looked between father and daughter with evident concern. "Wayne, maybe we should consider conventional legal approaches." "Conventional approaches assume that your opponents are operating within conventional boundaries," Wayne interrupted. "Rebecca and her allies have demonstrated that they're willing to lie, steal, and endanger innocent people to get what they want." Wayne walked to the window, looking out at the city while his mind processed options and probabilities. "They want to play victim while destroying everything I've built. They're about to learn that victims can fight back. What are you planning?" Wayne turned back to Edmund and Miranda, his expression carrying the cold calculation of someone preparing for war. "I'm planning to give them exactly what they've earned." Wayne spent the next hour outlining his strategy. By the time he finished, both Edmund and Miranda understood that the conflict had moved far beyond divorce proceedings or family disputes. "This is going to destroy all of them," Edmund said quietly. "That's the point," Wayne replied. "Rebecca wanted to take half of everything I own while sleeping with another man. Luke wanted to sell my name and reputation to cover his gambling debts. Devine wanted to use my family's destruction to solve his financial problems." Wayne gathered the surveillance photos and legal documents. "They're going to get exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected." The first phase of Wayne's response began at sunset. While Rebecca, Luke, and Devine celebrated what they believed was their legal victory, Wayne implemented the trap he'd been preparing since discovering their betrayal. The beauty of Wayne's plan lay in its simplicity. Instead of fighting Rebecca's allegations in court, he was going to make them come true. At 9 p.m., Wayne parked across the street from Brandon Devine's apartment building. This time, he made no effort to conceal his presence. He wanted to be seen, photographed, documented. When Devine's security cameras recorded Wayne's arrival, Wayne smiled and waved at the lenses. Edmund's voice crackled through Wayne's earpiece. "You sure about this?" "Absolutely," Wayne replied. "Time to give them something real to complain about." Wayne entered the building through the service entrance, his lock-picking skills making short work of the inadequate security. The building's surveillance system was more sophisticated than expected, but Wayne had prepared for that contingency. The devices he planted throughout the building were not surveillance equipment. There was something much more interesting. By midnight, Wayne had visited 4 locations: Devine's apartment building, Rebecca's hotel, Luke's favorite gambling establishment, and Patricia Hawkins' law office. At each location, he left subtle calling cards that would be discovered over the next few days. "Phase 1 complete," Wayne reported as he returned to his truck. "I still think this is insane." Edmund's voice carried deep concern. "Sanity is overrated," Wayne replied. "Besides, they started this war. I'm just finishing it." The next morning brought the restraining order hearing that Rebecca had requested. Wayne arrived early, dressed in his best suit and carrying a briefcase that suggested legal preparedness. Patricia Hawkins had clearly expected Wayne to appear frightened or defensive. Instead, she found herself facing a man who radiated calm confidence and seemed genuinely pleased to be there. "Your Honor," Hawkins addressed the judge, "my client fears for her safety. Mr. Snyder has been conducting surveillance, making threats, and displaying weapons in a clear pattern of intimidation." Judge Martinez, a stern woman in her 50s, reviewed the filing with evident skepticism. "Mr. Snyder, how do you respond to these allegations?" Wayne stood with military precision. "Your Honor, I categorically deny threatening my wife or anyone else. However, I have been investigating financial irregularities that suggest my wife has been stealing from our joint accounts to fund an extramarital affair." Wayne opened his briefcase and produced documents that made Patricia Hawkins' face go pale. These are bank records showing systematic theft totaling approximately $40,000, transferred to accounts controlled by Brandon Devine. There are also records of my wife accessing confidential business information and passing it to unauthorized parties. Judge Martinez examined the documents with growing interest. "Ms. Hawkins, was your client aware that she might be facing criminal charges for theft and industrial espionage?" Hawkins fumbled for a response while Rebecca sat, in stunned silence. Wayne's financial documentation was comprehensive, professionally prepared, and absolutely damning. Furthermore, Your Honor, Wayne continued, I have evidence that my son has been incurring gambling debts using my name as collateral, potentially exposing my family to criminal retaliation. Wayne produced additional documents, including the restraining order he'd filed against Luke and recorded conversations between Luke and Sergei Kozlov. Mr. Snyder, Judge Martinez's voice carried new respect. These are serious allegations. Have you filed criminal complaints? Yes, Your Honor. The FBI is investigating the industrial espionage charges, and local police are handling the identity theft. Both statements were lies, but they would be true by the end of the day. Wayne had contacts in both agencies who owed him favors from his military service. Judge Martinez turned to Patricia Hawkins. Ms. Hawkins, in light of these revelations, do you wish to modify your client's requests? Hawkins whispered frantically with Rebecca before responding. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to review this new information. Denied. Mr. Snyder, I'm dismissing the restraining order request and awarding you temporary exclusive possession of the marital home pending resolution of the criminal investigations. Wayne felt a surge of satisfaction as Rebecca's face crumpled in defeat. The first battle was won, but the war was far from over. Outside the courthouse, Patricia Hawkins cornered Wayne with the desperation of someone watching a case collapse. Mr. Snyder, perhaps we could discuss a settlement that benefits everyone. Wayne's smile was predatory. Ms. Hawkins, I think you should advise your client that her situation is about to become much worse. The evidence I presented today represents about 10% of what I've discovered. What do you want? I want Rebecca to disappear from my life completely. No alimony, no asset division, no contact with my family. In exchange, I won't pursue criminal charges that would send her to federal prison. Hawkins paled. That's not reasonable. Wayne leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that made Hawkins step back involuntarily. Ms. Hawkins, your client destroyed my family while stealing my money to fund her affair with a man who's about to lose everything he owns to organized crime figures. Reasonable went out the window months ago. Wayne straightened and walked away, leaving Hawkins staring after him with the expression of someone who'd just realized she was severely outmatched. The day's victories were satisfying, but Wayne knew they were just the beginning. Rebecca, Luke, and Devine would regroup, probably become more desperate, and certainly more dangerous, which was exactly what Wayne wanted. Desperate people made stupid mistakes, and Wayne specialized in exploiting stupidity. By evening, Wayne had received confirmation that the devices he'd planted the previous night were beginning to have their intended effect. Devine's building had been evacuated due to a gas leak that would take weeks to repair. Rebecca's hotel had discovered structural issues that required immediate relocation of all guests. Luke's gambling establishment had been raided by federal agents investigating financial irregularities. The campaign of chaos was proceeding exactly as planned. They're going to know it was you, Miranda observed as they reviewed the day's developments. Of course they will, Wayne replied. But they won't be able to prove it, and more importantly, they won't be able to stop it. Wayne's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. BD. Wayne showed the message to Miranda, who read it with evident satisfaction. Brandon Devine wants to negotiate. Everyone wants to negotiate when they start losing, Wayne observed. The question is whether they have anything left to offer. Wayne typed a reply. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone. The response was immediate. Agreed. Wayne smiled as he pocketed his phone. Tomorrow night, he would face Brandon Devine directly and settle the score once and for all. But first, there were other preparations to make and other enemies to neutralize. The war was entering its final phase, and Wayne intended to make sure there were no survivors on the opposing side. Chapter 7. The Confrontation. Riverside Park at 8 p.m. was deserted except for the occasional jogger and the distant sound of traffic. Wayne arrived early, positioning himself with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes, habits from his military days that had served him well in civilian life. Brandon Devine arrived precisely on time, his usual arrogance replaced by the nervous energy of a man watching his world collapse. The expensive suit couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the slight tremor in his hands that suggested either fear or drug use. Snyder. Devine's voice carried forced confidence as he approached Wayne's position near the river. Devine. Wayne remained seated on the park bench, projecting calm indifference. You look like hell. Devine's laugh was bitter. Thanks to you. My building's been condemned, my investors are panicking, and the FBI is asking very uncomfortable questions about my business practices. Sounds like karma. Cut the shit, Wayne. We both know you're behind this. Devine sat on the opposite end of the bench, maintaining distance while trying to project authority. I'm here to make a deal. Wayne turned to study Devine with clinical interest. What could you possibly have that I want? Information. Rebecca's been telling me things about your business, your background, your clients. Things that certain people would find very interesting. Wayne felt the familiar cold rage, but his voice remained conversational. You're threatening to expose classified information about my military service? I'm offering to keep my mouth shut in exchange for you backing off. Wayne laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Brandon, you clearly don't understand the situation you're in. Wayne stood and walked to the railing overlooking the river, his movement casual but purposeful. Let me explain what's really happening here. I'm listening. You seduced my wife, convinced her to steal from our family, and used that money to prop up your failing business. You involved my son in your schemes and put my family at risk with organized crime figures. Wayne turned back to face Devine, his expression cold and calculating. You destroyed 15 years of marriage and corrupted my son because you thought it would solve your financial problems. Rebecca came to me, Wayne. I didn't seduce anyone. Rebecca is a greedy, entitled woman who's never worked a day in her life. You knew exactly what you were doing when you targeted her. Devine's mask finally slipped, revealing the predator underneath. Your wife was bored and frustrated with a husband who treated her like a roommate. I gave her something you never could. Wayne smiled, and something in that expression made Devine step back. What I never gave Rebecca was unlimited money to fund her shopping addiction and enable our son's gambling problem. What I never gave her was permission to destroy our family for her own entertainment. Wayne moved closer to Devine, who tried to maintain his ground but couldn't hide his growing nervousness. But mostly what I never gave Rebecca was a reason to cross someone who's killed people professionally. Devine's face went pale. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining your situation. Rebecca told you I was a veteran, but she didn't know what kind. She told you I was successful, but she didn't know how. She told you I was predictable, but she was wrong about that too. Wayne reached into his jacket, and Devine flinched visibly. Wayne pulled out a manila folder and handed it to Devine. Open it. Devine's hand shook slightly as he opened the folder. Inside were photographs, financial records, and documents that painted a comprehensive picture of every illegal activity Devine had engaged in over the past 5 years. Tax evasion, fraud, bribery of public officials, and my personal favorite, using mob money to fund projects while skimming from legitimate investors. Devine flipped through the documents with growing horror. How did you get these? Professional connections, specialized skills, the kind of resources that people like you never see coming. Wayne took the folder back and returned it to his jacket. The interesting thing about those documents is that they're currently in the hands of about 6 different law enforcement agencies. Your tax problems are just the beginning. You can't prove any of this. I don't need to prove anything, Brandon. Your own records prove everything. The surveillance cameras in your office, the recorded phone calls with your accountant, the digital trail of every bribe you've paid. Wayne pulled out his phone and played a brief audio clip. Devine's voice discussing the transfer of mob money to legitimate accounts. You've been under surveillance for 3 months, Brandon. Every crime, every lie, every betrayal has been documented by professionals who know how to make evidence stick in court. Devine sat heavily on the bench, the weight of his situation finally sinking in. What do you want? I want you to understand that Rebecca didn't save you from your financial problems. She destroyed you completely. Wayne sat back down, his posture relaxed, but his eyes never leaving Devine's face. Your mob creditors are going to learn about your FBI investigation within the next few hours. They don't like dealing with people who attract federal attention. You told them. I don't need to tell them anything. Their sources in law enforcement will provide all the information they need. Devine's face went white as he realized the implications. They'll kill me. Probably. Unless you disappear very quickly and very thoroughly. This is insane. Over what? A marriage that was already dead. Wayne's expression hardened. Over 15 years of my life that Rebecca destroyed for money. Over a son who chose to betray his family rather than face his problems. Over a business I built with my blood that you tried to steal for your own benefit. Wayne stood again, signaling that the conversation was nearing its end. But mostly, it's about the fact that you thought you could cross a man like me without consequences. Wayne, please. We can work something out. I'll disappear, leave town, never contact Rebecca again. Too late for that, Brandon. Rebecca made her choice when she decided to fund your lifestyle with my money. You made your choice when you decided to corrupt my son and threaten my business. Wayne pulled out a second phone, one of several burner phones he'd acquired for this operation. This contains everything you need to disappear completely. New identity documents, offshore accounts, transportation to a country without extradition treaties. Devine stared at the phone as if it were a snake. Why would you help me? Because dead men can't suffer, and I want you to spend the rest of your life knowing that Rebecca destroyed everything you cared about. Wayne dropped the phone on the bench between them. You have 12 hours before the FBI raids your remaining properties and the Torino family decides you're too dangerous to keep alive. Wayne started to walk away, then turned back one final time. Oh, and Brandon, if you ever contact anyone in my family again, I'll hunt you down personally. And unlike the mob, I'll make sure you live long enough to regret it. Wayne left Devine sitting alone on the bench, staring at the phone that represented his only chance at survival. As Wayne walked back to his truck, his own phone buzzed with updates from Edmund's surveillance team. Rebecca was at her hotel, frantically making phone calls and crying. Luke was at Kozlov's nightclub, apparently trying to negotiate additional credit using information about Wayne's meeting with Devine. Both of them were about to receive very unpleasant surprises. Wayne's phone rang as he reached his truck. The caller ID showed Miranda's number. Dad, where are you? Finishing business. Is everything all right? Mom's here. At the house. She's demanding to be let in, claiming the court order gives her the right. Wayne felt cold fury wash over him. Where exactly is she? Front door. She has Luke with her, and they're both acting strange. Desperate. Wayne started his truck and pulled into traffic, driving faster than safety recommended. Miranda, I want you to go to my office and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me. What about Mom and Luke? They're about to learn that some doors, once closed, can never be opened again. Wayne's meeting with Devine had been a professional necessity, but Rebecca and Luke coming to his house was personal. They'd crossed the final line by threatening Miranda's safety. As Wayne drove home, he made a series of phone calls to contacts whose services he never expected to need in civilian life. By the time he reached his driveway, the final pieces of his plan were in motion. Rebecca and Luke's war against the Snyder family was about to end, but not in the way they'd anticipated. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. Wayne arrived home to find Rebecca's Mercedes parked in his driveway and lights on throughout the house. Through the front windows, he could see Rebecca and Luke moving through rooms they no longer had any right to occupy. The sight of them in his home, touching his possessions, invading the space he'd built for his family, triggered something deep and primal in Wayne's psyche. The controlled military professional disappeared, replaced by something far more dangerous. Wayne entered through the back door, moving with the silent efficiency that had kept him alive in hostile territories. The house felt different with intruders inside it, contaminated by their presence and their desperate scheming. He found them in his office, Rebecca frantically searching through filing cabinets while Luke stood guard by the window. They'd triggered his silent alarm system the moment they entered, but Wayne hadn't called the police. Some violations required personal attention. Looking for something specific, Wayne's voice cut through the room like a blade. Rebecca spun around, her face cycling through fear, defiance, and desperate calculation. Luke stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp in his panic. Wayne, Rebecca's voice carried forced brightness. I was just collecting some personal items. Breaking and entering is what you were doing. Wayne stepped into the room, noting the scattered papers and open drawers that revealed the true scope of their search, along with attempted theft and violation of a court order. Luke tried to edge toward the door, but Wayne's gaze pinned him in place. Going somewhere, Luke? Dad, I can explain. Explain what? How you've been selling information about my business to cover your gambling debts. How you've been helping your mother steal from our family accounts. How you just tried to flee the scene of a crime. Luke's face crumpled with the realization that Wayne knew everything. I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, Luke. You chose money over family. You chose betrayal over loyalty. You chose to become an enemy of your own father. Rebecca stepped between them, her voice taking on the manipulative tone that had worked for 15 years. Wayne, we're still a family. We can work through this. We stopped being a family the moment you decided to fuck Brandon Devine in a hotel room while stealing my money to pay for it. Rebecca flinched at the crude language, but her mask of victimhood remained in place. I made mistakes, but that doesn't mean... Mistakes? Wayne's laugh was cold and terrible. Rebecca, you systematically destroyed 15 years of marriage while corrupting our son and endangering our daughter. Those weren't mistakes. They were choices. Wayne moved to his desk and opened a secure drawer, removing a thick folder that made both Rebecca and Luke step back nervously. Would you like to see the evidence I've compiled? The photographs of your hotel meetings? The financial records showing every dollar you stole? The recordings of Luke selling my business information to pay gambling debts? Wayne spread photographs across his desk, images of Rebecca and Devine embracing, Luke meeting with Kozlov, financial documents showing the systematic theft from Wayne's accounts. This is comprehensive documentation of your betrayal, compiled by professionals who know how to make evidence admissible in criminal court. Rebecca's defiance finally cracked. What do you want, Wayne? I want you both out of my house and out of my life. Permanently. And if we refuse? Wayne's smile was predatory. Then you'll discover what happens when people cross someone with my particular skill set. Luke found his voice, though it shook with fear. You can't threaten us, Dad. We have rights. Rights? Wayne turned his full attention to his son, and Luke visibly wilted under the scrutiny. Luke, you forfeited your rights when you chose to become a criminal. You're no longer my son. You're a threat to my family that needs to be neutralized. Wayne opened another drawer and removed a handgun, checking the magazine with practiced efficiency. Wayne, you can't be serious. Rebecca's voice rose to a near shriek. You wouldn't actually, wouldn't I? Wayne's voice was conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. Rebecca, I've killed people for my country. I've eliminated threats to national security. Do you really think I'd hesitate to protect my family from domestic enemies? The room fell silent except for the sound of Luke's labored breathing and Rebecca's muffled sobbing. However, Wayne continued, I'm prepared to offer you both a choice. What kind of choice? Rebecca asked through her tears. Wayne returned the weapon to his drawer, but left it visible. You can disappear quietly, or you can be disappeared. The outcome is the same, but the method depends on your level of cooperation. You're insane, Luke whispered. I'm practical, Wayne corrected. You've both proven that you can't be trusted with freedom or proximity to my family. That problem needs to be solved. Wayne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled with genuine pleasure. Excellent timing. Brandon Devine just boarded a flight to Singapore using the documents I provided. He chose the smart option. Rebecca's face went white. Brandon left? Permanently. He's never coming back, and if he's smart, he'll never contact you again. The implications sank in slowly. Rebecca had lost her lover, her marriage, her financial security, and now faced criminal charges with no one to help her. You destroyed everything, she whispered. I returned the favor, Wayne replied coldly. Luke stepped forward, desperation making him stupid. Dad, please. I'll do anything. Luke, the time for negotiation ended when you brought organized crime into my life without my consent. Wayne pulled out his phone and showed them both a text message thread. Sergei Kozlov has been very understanding about your debt situation. He's agreed to accept alternative forms of payment. Luke's eyes widened with horror as he read the messages. What kind of alternative payment? The kind that involves you working off your debt through service commitments. Kozlov has several business ventures that require reliable labor. The euphemism wasn't lost on Luke. Kozlov was offering indentured servitude as an alternative to violence. You sold me to the Russian mob? Luke's voice cracked. You sold yourself, Luke. I just negotiated better terms than you would have gotten on your own. Wayne closed his phone and returned his attention to Rebecca. As for you, Rebecca, your situation is more complex. Brandon is gone, so you have no financial support. I'm keeping everything we built together, so you have no assets. Your theft of business documents has attracted federal attention, so you have legal problems that won't disappear. Rebecca looked around the room desperately, searching for any avenue of escape or negotiation. Wayne, please. I'll sign any papers you want. I'll disappear. I'll never contact you or Miranda again. Too late for that, Rebecca. You had months to make better choices. Now you get to live with the consequences of the choices you made. Wayne opened his secure drawer again and removed a different set of documents. These are 3 options for your immediate future. Option 1. You can accept voluntary commitment to a psychiatric facility that specializes in treating people with adjustment disorders. The program lasts 18 months and includes complete isolation from outside contact. Rebecca stared at the documents with growing horror. Option 2. You can relocate to a very small town in Montana where you'll work in a service position that provides basic housing and subsistence wages. No credit cards, no bank accounts, no contact with your previous life. That's not legal. Option 3, Wayne continued as if she hadn't spoken, involves accepting full responsibility for your actions and facing the criminal charges without any help from me. Wayne leaned back in his chair, studying both of them with the detached interest of someone observing laboratory specimens. Those are your choices. Supervised rehabilitation, supervised exile, or federal prison. Pick one. Luke was the first to break. I'll take the work arrangement with Kozlov. At least then I have a chance of paying off the debt eventually. Wayne nodded approvingly. Smart choice. Kozlov values reliability and work ethic. If you demonstrate both, you might survive the experience. Rebecca remained silent, her mind clearly racing through impossible calculations. I need time to think, she finally said. You have until tomorrow morning. After that, I make the choice for you. Wayne stood and moved toward the door, then paused. One final thing. Miranda is off limits to both of you. Any attempt to contact her, threaten her, or involve her in your problems will result in consequences that will make your current situation seem pleasant by comparison. Wayne left them in his office, closing the door behind him. He found Miranda waiting in the kitchen, her face pale but determined. I heard voices, she said. Are they gone? Soon, Wayne replied. Very soon. Wayne sat across from his daughter and studied her face, noting the strength and intelligence that reminded him of himself at her age. Miranda, I need you to understand something. What I just did in their cross lines that most people would consider unforgivable. They crossed those lines first, Dad. Yes, they did. But I want you to be very clear about who your father really is. Wayne leaned forward, his voice serious and direct. I'm not a good man, Miranda. I'm a man who does what's necessary to protect the people I care about. Sometimes it means doing terrible things to terrible people. Miranda reached across the table and took his hand. You're the only person in this family who ever kept their word to me. You're the only one who ever put family before personal convenience. If that makes you a bad man, then good men aren't worth much. Wayne felt a surge of pride and affection for his daughter that surprised him with its intensity. In that case, he said with a smile, we should probably discuss your college plans. I'm thinking somewhere far from here, with excellent security and very strict admission standards. Are you trying to get rid of me, too? Wayne's expression softened. I'm trying to give you the life you deserve. Away from the mess that your mother and brother created, and away from the methods I had to use to clean it up. They sat in comfortable silence, while Rebecca and Luke presumably struggled with choices that had no good outcomes. By morning, Wayne's family would be reduced to just him and Miranda. Everyone else would be gone, disappeared into the consequences of their own betrayals. It wasn't the ending Wayne had wanted for his family, but it was the ending that honor and justice demanded. Chapter 9. Blood and Retribution. Dawn broke gray and cold over the Snyder house, matching Wayne's mood as he prepared for the final confrontation. Rebecca and Luke had spent the night in the guest rooms, their presence a contamination that Wayne was eager to cleanse permanently. At 7 a.m. sharp, Wayne knocked on Rebecca's door with the measured cadence of a military reveille. "Time's up, Rebecca. What's your decision?" The woman who emerged bore little resemblance to the perfectly groomed socialite who dominated Wayne's dinner table just days before. Her makeup was smeared, her designer clothes wrinkled, and her eyes held the wild desperation of someone whose world had collapsed completely. "I'll take the Montana option," she whispered. Wayne nodded with satisfaction. "Smart choice." Luke made the same decision about Kozlov's offer. "When do we leave?" "Within the hour. My associates are already making final arrangements." Rebecca's face crumpled as the reality sank in. "Wayne, please. One last chance. We could try counseling or—" "Rebecca." Wayne's voice cut through her pleading like a scalpel. "Look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his, and what she saw there made her step back in genuine terror. Wayne's expression held no warmth, no mercy, no trace of the man she'd married 15 years ago. "You destroyed our marriage, corrupted our son, endangered our daughter, and stole money to fund your affair with a man who's fled the country to escape federal prosecution." Wayne stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried absolute finality. "There is no counseling for what you've done. There is no second chance for people who betray their families. There is only justice, and justice is what you're receiving." Wayne turned away from her stricken face. "You have 30 minutes to pack one suitcase. Personal items only. Everything else stays here." Luke appeared in the hallway, looking like a condemned man walking to his execution. His face was pale, his hands shook slightly, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd finally understood the true cost of his choices. "Dad." Luke's voice was barely audible. "What is it, Luke?" I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything." Wayne studied his son's face, searching for any trace of genuine remorse beneath the fear and desperation. What he found was regret, certainly, but regret for consequences rather than actions. "Luke, you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference." "That's not true." "It's absolutely true." Wayne's voice carried the cold certainty of someone who'd learned to read men's souls under extreme conditions. "If you were truly sorry, you would have come to me months ago when Rebecca first asked you to help her steal from our family." Luke's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, unable to form a response that wouldn't confirm Wayne's assessment. "If you were truly sorry," Wayne continued, "you wouldn't have used my name to accumulate gambling debts without my knowledge or consent." Wayne moved closer to his son, noting how Luke flinched away from the proximity. "Most importantly, if you were truly sorry, you would have protected Miranda instead of trying to steal her salary to fund your lifestyle." The accusation hit Luke like a physical blow. I wouldn't have." "You absolutely would have, Luke. Rebecca had told me about your conversations, remember? How you both planned to pressure Miranda into contributing to family expenses while you pissed away my money and she spent on her boyfriend." Wayne's voice took on a note of genuine disgust. "You're not my son anymore, Luke. You're a stranger who shares my name and my DNA, but you chose to become my enemy." Luke's face collapsed completely, tears streaming down his cheeks as the full weight of his losses finally registered. "Dad, please don't do this. I know I messed up, but I'm still your son." "No." Wayne's voice was quiet but absolute. "My son would have protected his family. My son would have chosen honor over money. My son would have faced his problems instead of making them someone else's responsibility." Wayne checked his watch with military precision. "Kozlov's people will be here in 20 minutes. I suggest you use that time wisely." As Luke stumbled back to his room, Wayne felt something he hadn't expected: relief. The difficult conversations were finished, the hard decisions made. What remained was simply execution. Miranda emerged from the kitchen, carrying coffee and wearing an expression of quiet determination. "How are you holding up?" Wayne asked. "Better than I expected," she replied honestly. "I I keep thinking I should feel worse about watching my family fall apart, but mostly I just feel free. Wayne accepted the coffee gratefully. That's because it wasn't really your family falling apart. It was the exposure of what your family had already become. And what had it become? Wayne considered the question seriously. A criminal conspiracy masquerading as a household. Rebecca, Luke, and even your grandfather were all involved in activities that put you and my business at risk. What about Grandpa Ronald? Wayne's expression hardened. Ronald Marks has been facilitating Rebecca's activities from the beginning. The money for her hotel meetings, the legal advice for her divorce plans, even some of the pressure on you to contribute to family expenses. Miranda's eyes widened. He was part of it. He's been part of it for months. Ronald has always believed that money justifies any behavior, and Rebecca learned those values from him. Wayne's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and nodded with satisfaction. Kozlov's transportation has arrived for Luke. Rebecca's escort will be here in 10 minutes. Miranda looked toward the hallway, where muffled sounds suggested frantic packing. Will we ever see them again? Wayne considered the question carefully. Luke, possibly, if he survives his arrangement with Kozlov and learns to make better choices. Rebecca, Wayne shrugged. That depends entirely on her ability to accept responsibility for her actions. And you think that's unlikely? I think Rebecca has spent 38 years blaming other people for the consequences of her choices. Prison or exile won't change that fundamental character flaw. The front doorbell rang with the precision of a military operation. Wayne answered to find two men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of professional competence that suggested extensive experience with difficult extractions. Mr. Snyder? We're here for the package. Wayne nodded and called up the stairs. Luke, your transportation is here. Luke appeared at the top of the stairs carrying a single duffel bag and wearing the expression of someone walking to his own funeral. He descended slowly, each step seeming to require enormous effort. At the bottom of the stairs, Luke turned to Wayne one final time. Dad, will you tell Miranda that I... No. Wayne's voice was firm but not unkind. If you want to apologize to your sister, you'll have to earn that right. Actions have consequences, Luke, and some consequences last longer than others. Luke nodded slowly, understanding finally penetrating his desperation. He walked to the door, where Kozlov's men waited with professional patience. Mr. Snyder, one of them addressed Luke formally. Are you ready to begin your service commitment? Luke looked back at Wayne and Miranda one final time, then straightened his shoulders with something approaching dignity. Yes, I'm ready. Wayne watched from the window as Luke was escorted to a black sedan that disappeared into morning traffic. One threat to his family had been neutralized permanently. 10 minutes later, Rebecca's transportation arrived. A different vehicle, different personnel, but the same professional efficiency. Rebecca appeared at the top of the stairs, looking like a broken woman carrying decades of regret in a single suitcase. Wayne, she said as she reached the bottom of the stairs, I want you to know that I did love you. Once. Wayne studied her face, searching for honesty beneath the manipulation. What he found was a woman who'd spent so many years lying that she could no longer distinguish truth from performance. I believe you think that's true, Rebecca. But love doesn't steal from family accounts to fund affairs with other men. Rebecca's face crumpled, but Wayne continued with relentless honesty. Love doesn't corrupt children to cover up betrayal. Love doesn't endanger innocent people to avoid personal responsibility. Wayne stepped closer to his wife of 15 years, close enough that she could see the absolute finality in his eyes. What you felt for me was ownership, not love. What you felt for Luke was enabling, not affection. What you felt for Miranda was resentment, not maternal care. Rebecca tried to speak, but Wayne held up a hand to stop her. You're leaving now, Rebecca. You'll never contact my family again. You'll never use my name for credit or reference. You'll never speak of your time in this house or your relationship with this family. Wayne's voice dropped to a whisper that carried the weight of absolute threat. Because if you do any of those things, I will find you. And when I find you, you'll discover that exile in Montana was the merciful option. Rebecca nodded mutely, understanding that her former husband had become something far more dangerous than the soldier she'd married. "Mrs. Snyder?" The transportation specialist spoke with professional courtesy. "We're ready when you are." Rebecca walked to the door, then turned back one final time. "Miranda," she called to her daughter, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. "I hope you understand someday." "I understand perfectly," Miranda interrupted, her voice carrying the same steel that Wayne had heard in his own. "I understand that you chose money over family, lies over truth, and selfishness over sacrifice." Miranda stepped closer to her mother, and Rebecca saw the same implacable judgment in her daughter's eyes that she'd seen in Wayne's. "I understand that you tried to steal from me to fund your affair. I understand that you wanted to destroy Dad's business to benefit your boyfriend. I understand that you never loved any of us enough to choose us over your own convenience." Miranda's voice never rose above conversational level, but each word hit Rebecca like a physical blow. "So yes, Mom, I understand perfectly. I understand that you're not my mother anymore. You're just a woman who used to live in our house." Rebecca staggered as if struck, finally comprehending that she'd lost her daughter as completely as she'd lost her husband. "Miranda, please." "Goodbye, Rebecca." The use of her first name instead of Mom was the final nail in the coffin of their relationship. Rebecca walked through the door and into a future that held no trace of the family she destroyed. Wayne and Miranda stood together in the sudden silence of their house, watching the second vehicle disappear into the morning haze. "Is it over?" Miranda asked. Wayne considered the question carefully. "The immediate threats are neutralized. Rebecca and Luke are gone permanently. Devine has fled the country. The organized crime debts have been transferred away from our family. But there will be consequences and complications. Legal proceedings, financial adjustments, probably some attempts at retaliation from people who don't understand that the war is over." Wayne turned to study his daughter's face, noting the strength and maturity that had emerged during their ordeal. "Are you prepared for that, Miranda?" Miranda's smile was sharp and confident, carrying an edge that reminded Wayne of himself. "Dad, after watching you destroy 3 adults who thought they could betray our family without consequences, I'm prepared for anything." Wayne felt a surge of pride and satisfaction. Miranda had inherited his strength without his darkness, his determination without his ruthlessness. She would survive and thrive in ways that Rebecca and Luke never could. "In that case," Wayne said with the first genuine smile he'd felt in months, "let's discuss your college plans. I'm thinking somewhere with excellent security and a strong business program." "Business?" "You've demonstrated excellent judgment, tactical thinking, and the ability to make hard decisions under pressure. Those are valuable skills in any profession." Miranda laughed, a sound of genuine happiness that filled the house with something it had been missing for far too long. "As long as I don't have to specialize in whatever it is you do." Wayne's smile turned predatory. "Miranda, what I do is protect my family from people who threaten them. I'd say you've already mastered that particular skill set." As they walked back into their house now, free of contamination and betrayal, Wayne felt the satisfaction of a mission completed successfully. Rebecca, Luke, and Devine had learned that crossing a Snyder carried consequences they could never have imagined. They'd chosen betrayal over loyalty, lies over truth, and selfishness over family. Now, they would live with those choices for the rest of their lives. Wayne and Miranda, meanwhile, would build something better from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Something honest, strong, and worthy of the Snyder name. The war was over.